Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Alongside Ezra Ginsburg, alongside Dave Manouk, I am your host, Drew Mindell, talking about the Winnipeg Jets on the Saturday, the 12th day of June in the year 2021. Gentlemen, nice to see you both on this Saturday morning. It has been a little while, given that we actually haven't seen each other or spoken to each other since Monday. And boy, has that been a nice break, I must say.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying the date as well, because I oftentimes have no idea what month or year it is, because the last 15 months has been like an absolute time warp. So I appreciate that. Like I thought it was like May 4th or something. I have no idea. So I was hoping for, May the 4th be with you, I guess, Dave. But it's a little bit weird considering we were doing those back-to-back post-game shows, right, in the Edmonton series and the Montreal series. So it was nice to have a little time off, even though I could always talk hockey with you boys. But we have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a little quiet here, for 2 or 3 weeks, but, in July, and you heard, Kevin Cheveldayoff talking about it, it's going to get really busy with, first the expansion draft and then the draft and free agency. So it might be, 28 or 29 degrees out this afternoon, but we're still talking hockey all summer long, boys.
That's absolutely the case with Mr. Ginsburg. Dave Manouk repping the Pittsburgh Pirates on this Saturday morning. Nice to see that despite the Pirates, I think, if they're not the worst team in Major League Baseball, they're certainly right close to the bottom. But nice to see that your loyalty runs through it thick and thick there, Dave.
As you should know, and I'm sure as you do know, there is no loyalty. I just wear hats as they come across the hat collection of the closet, and then I just arbitrarily choose one. So no affinity, no loyalty to the Pittsburgh Pirates, other than I think they have a nice logo and it's a good hat. But no,
I think that's your go-to one, though, Dave. It seems like you wear that one.
I do like this one. Yeah, I mean, the problem is I haven't been to a store in 16 months really. So, and heaven forbid I actually try and buy something online.
I was going to say they have a new thing called the internet.
But hats are a very personalized purchase. I just can't buy it online. I have to be in the store. So there hasn't been any new hat purchases in a while. So we'll see. There's some. I mean, obviously we talk about IC swag. That's an opportunity to get some new hats, but also I want to get some buys and stuff. I think we've got to start supporting the local school. So we'll see if we can do that.
Well, as he's a U of W Westman guy and whatever the Red River College school is. I'm not sure what their nickname is, but
I should probably know that. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, is it the Pioneers? For some reason, I want to say it's the Pioneers, but I don't know if that's right at all. So, if somebody else went to Red River besides Ezzy and maybe was more
I want to say Raiders.
The Red River Raiders?
Yeah, I might be wrong about that, but
it's very alliterative. At the very least. But if anyone else actually knows the answer, then by all means, put it into the chat, and we'll throw that up on the. We'll mention that in the discussion. And any event, we're here to talk. Not about the local university school nicknames. We're here to talk about the Winnipeg Jets.
Rebels. It's the Rebels.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
Yeah. Wonder if that'll need. They're gonna immediately change that. Is what's going to happen there. They're not going to have to find a way to change that. But in any event, we'll talk about the Winnipeg Jets rather than the Red River College Rebels. The exit interviews obviously happened this week. It happened on Wednesday when the players, after they came back from Montreal, the disappointing end to the season, losing 4 straight to the Montreal Canadiens, going out with a whimper, going out meekly, going out with really no fight shown by the Winnipeg Jets, I would say, given how one-sided those 4 games were. And the exit interviews for the players were on Wednesday. Yesterday, Kevin Cheveldayoff and Paul Maurice spoke to the media. Let's start with Chevy and Maurice, and we'll get to the players throughout the course of this morning's show. I got to say, guys, I thought the tone that was adopted by by Chevy and by Maurice was completely not inappropriate, but I thought that it had absolutely no bearing in reality. To me, they sounded like a team that was one bad bounce away from accomplishing something great and getting to the third round of the playoffs, rather than how I see it as a team whose flaws were exposed dramatically and for everybody around the NHL to see. going into the playoffs, there was a lot of talk that the Jets, of course, were, we know about their struggles at 5-on-5. We know how Connor Hellebuck, sort of lifts everything up on the team because he's such an exceptional goaltender. To me, it was like watching a complete Twilight Zone analysis of the Winnipeg Jets, given how Maurice and Kevin Cheveldayoff met with the media.
Yeah, fair enough, Drew. And, everyone kind of, interprets and perceives these end of season press conferences differently. I mean, we've gone through a lot of them, right? Like, I think we would all agree that, it's, something every year where, you expect, some answers that, don't give you much insight, and then other answers that give you a lot of insight. First off, I love that Pomo was doing the Zoom call from his cottage. Nice to see his, background and his books in the background, but I'm obviously joking. But look, let's start with Paul Maurice, right? Like, I think there was much more there, for me at least, than there was with Chevy. And we know that Chevy, keeps his cards close to his chest, right? But what I thought was maybe the most interesting, Maurice talked a lot about culture, and Dave would know this because, he was covering it for the website, illegalcurve.com. There was a lot of talk of, that he thought the culture on this, Maurice I'm talking about, thought the culture of the Jets right now is as good as it's ever been since he took over from the team in, 2014, I think 13. So, that was something that I thought was interesting because it wasn't something that he was asked about. Another thing that I thought was very interesting, and you knew this was coming, guys, the questions about the young players, right? So whether that's, a Ville Heinola or, whether that's a Christian Vesalainen, I guess you could throw in Logan Stanley and Jansen Harkins in there as well. David Gustafsson, who, Dave's a big fan of, and I think has been pushing for quite some time now to get, some more time in the NHL. If you listen to what Maurice said, I mean, I don't know if there is going to be as big of an influx of young players next year. I think, we'd all agree, guys, Heinola is ready for prime time, right? Like, he's ready to play a full-time role in the NHL. But we know, there's guys like, Dylan Samberg, and I just mentioned Gustafsson, who are also banging at the door. I mean, there's a few other guys, but those are really, the main players that we're talking about. And then you throw in a Vesalainen who didn't play the entire year, with the Jets, and he's another guy. So you're talking about 4 or 5 players. Throw Cole Perfetti in there, even though he might play in the OHL for the 21-22 season. If you listen to what he was saying in terms of, you aren't necessarily going to see, 3 or 4 young defensemen, or you're not going to see, a young first or second year player on the fourth line. I think to me that was a little bit surprising, because I think that's kind of what the Jets were lacking a little bit here. In this series against the Montreal Canadiens, like some energy, that puck moving ability, right? So yeah, like, you've got Logan Stanley, you've got Josh Morrissey on the left side, Dylan Samberg is a left shot defenseman, but I just thought it was interesting, even the way he was talking about Jansen Harkins, right? Like, he said something along the lines of, Hark's got to earn a spot next year, and he said something along the lines of, I wasn't ready to put some of our younger forwards up against the Edmonton Oilers power play. So Harkins would be one of the obvious guys, right?
But let me stop you right there, Ezzy. He did it last year when Jansen Harkins was younger. I mean, what my main takeaway about it, Dave, was that it's almost like they don't think people, media, fans, everybody probably joining us in the chat, it's almost like they don't think people remember what they said previously. Because the contradictory statements between one exit interview and this exit interview, or some various point in time last year and this point in time this year, to me, it's just like, people have a memory. People remember what you say, yet you're boldly contradicting yourself and expect people to just accept it. I mean, to me, it was just utterly bizarre. I mean, watching it afterwards, and listening to them, and I'm thinking to myself, what craziness am I listening to when I remember them saying the exact opposite thing 12 months ago?
Yeah, I mean, the point I made as just before we came on was, you look around the NHL, and if the Jets fourth line, look at the Islanders fourth line: Matt Martin, Casey Zizekas, Cal Clutterbuck. Tampa Bay: Pat Maroon, Tyler Johnson, Ross Colton. Vegas, William Carrier, Keegan Colasor, Ryan Reeves. I mean, if the Jets' fourth line looked like that, okay, there's no complaints. You're not going to say, that line is needs to be improved.
Don't forget Stahl, Armia, Perry, Dave.
Oh yeah, Stahl, Armia,
arguably the best fourth line remaining.
Yeah, that's right. Although I mean, nobody loves the Islanders' fourth line more than Ezzy. So
it's a great fourth line.
So to me, the unusual element was that idea that these guys are incapable. And the one thing I don't understand, I mean, Paul Maurice's big point at the beginning of the season, to your point, Drew, I mean, we listen. That's the problem. Maybe that's the problem for these guys, is that we actually do listen. And he said, I'm not going to let a guy go in who can only do one thing. And so, okay, so that's your philosophy. You're the coach. You're entitled to have that philosophy. The problem for Paul Maurice is that David Gustafsson, who arguably would be, I would say, is completely a responsible guy. And don't get me wrong, when we had Pascal Vincent on this show, I want to say at the end of March, he spoke about the things that David Gustafsson had to improve on. David Gustafsson isn't a perfect player yet. So, I mean, I don't want people to think I'm saying he's going to be in there and doing all of these things. He's a relatively young player who still has some things to develop as part of his, some elements of his game that need to be developed. All I would say, though, is that the things that Paul Maurice claims that these players can't do yet, they can do because they've done them in the AHL. So, I mean, I don't know how many people would know that and would be able to call him on that other than really me. And I was mic-less yesterday. The computer I was using had no camera, no mic. So I was on the call, but I really was just observing the call.
You were like Banksy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's interesting because I just don't really understand it, because like I said, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, David Gustafsson, first power play unit for the Manitoba Moose, first penalty kill, well, not first penalty, but just penalty kill for the Manitoba Moose. So he's done it all, right? I mean, he's, like I said, his only knock would be that he's 21 years of age, but the guy has talent. He's responsible. He's not going to make mistakes. He's got some offensive ability that we saw developing in Sweden this year with Tingsryd. Came over, played, kind of had that a little bit of that sort of impact with the Manitoba Moose. And I don't see why, the problem I have with Paul Maurice is, or the point that Paul Maurice made was, when you knew you were in the playoffs, forget about the 7-game slide. It was more the usage of the taxi squad and not getting these guys in, because I don't know who said it, but someone said, why not? When I think Murat might have asked the question, when are you going to give these guys the opportunity to fail through learning? And again, I understand that the NHL isn't the place to learn. I've always advocated that. That development. I mean, and I'll use Dylan Samberg as an example. Every expert had Dylan Samberg playing for the Jets this year. And again,
expert being, you're putting in quotes.
I'm saying I don't really care, to be honest with you. Most media who probably never watched him either would have said the same thing. And I would acknowledge, and all of us would acknowledge, none of us watched a second of Dylan Samberg in college, maybe a bit, but what I'm saying? Nobody actually could say they really watched Dylan Samberg's game. I spoke to someone who I trusted and is in the college game. He told me he said, Dylan Samberg is going to need time to marinate in the AHL. He's not ready for the NHL. So I trusted what that person told me because they watched him all the time, and they spoke to other people who watched him. And I didn't have that anticipation. And the point I'm making is that when I watched Dylan Samberg in the AHL, all I could think about was, this is the place for him. When he makes a mistake on a pinch that directly leads to a goal, Pascal Vincent uses it as a teaching moment, doesn't bench him, puts him up for the next shift. It's not things that you learn in the NHL. You don't want a defenseman to learn that, because he gets torched by the fans, he gets torched by the media, and he'll get torched by the coaching staff. So that's not a place for a young player, especially a defenseman, to learn their craft. David Gustafsson, like I said, in my mind, he would have been ready for this opportunity, and at least give him some reps, get him some muscle memory in the NHL. I don't even care if you don't want him in the playoffs. The point is, Nate Thompson, and we talked about it, how old is Nate Thompson? 35?
35, 36, something like that.
Why not give him a night off? Why not give him some rest and get a younger guy in to give him that opportunity? You're playing a condensed schedule. To me, it made no sense. That was the sort of rationale I didn't understand. And again, we've talked about it. You don't want a Christian Vesalainen, in my mind, on a fourth line, because he's not a fourth line checker. Well, David Gustafson is more than capable of coming in and being your response, especially if you pair him with like Trevor Lewis and Matthew Perreault. You know, if you're going to pair him with those two guys, he's got two experienced veterans that he can grow with. And you give Nate Thompson an opportunity to rest, and you give him an opportunity to have some nights off, and you give a young 2018 second-round pick the opportunity to get his NHL legs under him. That's my thought.
Watching the press conferences yesterday and listening to Paul Maurice, and he talks about how and I think it was in a response to a question about Ville Heinola, talking about how the Jets are stacked on the left side of the defense. I mean, I don't know about anybody else's heads, but my head basically exploded off my shoulders there, and I'm hoping that for the benefit of the doubt, he was maybe just got carried away or something, because there's absolutely nobody, no impartial observer, no, even the most rose-colored glasses wearing Jets fan would not be able to say with a straight face that the Jets are stacked anywhere on their back end, least of all the left side of their defense. I mean, it was just comment after comment that I found to be a non sequitur. He's talking about the culture in the dressing room. Well, nobody was asking about the culture in the dressing room. Nobody really thought that, the culture in the dressing room was a problem. But it's like, and I honestly don't know if this is just how it is outwardly, or maybe internally it's completely different, and I hope that it is. But it seems like they have no capacity for honest reflection about where the team is.
And capacity for change, Drew.
Well, sure, capacity for change, absolutely.
Yeah. And change not just in personnel, but kind of the philosophy. And what Dave was saying and what you're saying, I agree with 100%. Like, I think you could make a strong argument next year. David Gustafson, Christian Vesalainen, and Ville Heinola should be on your opening night roster, right? You guys would probably agree with that. Those three players, specifically Heinola and the way Vesalainen played. I mean, Vesalainen was actually one of their better forwards in the Montreal series. Like the fact that he wasn't even, a regular in the Jets lineup for the majority of the season, and he was one of the noticeable players in that series, tells you how bad the Jets were in that series, right? But like listening, and I agree with you, Drew, like, that the coach and the GM are going to try to spin everything in a positive way, right? Like there was a lot of references, boys, to top 8 and everything like that. Like I'm thinking to myself, like that means absolutely nothing. Yeah, it really does. Like ask Colorado. For them, getting to the top 8 is getting to the conference finals would have been a disappointment. Talk to Vegas. If Vegas would have lost that series, I mean, Bill Foley, we know he wants to win a Stanley Cup. He doesn't want to get to the Stanley Cup final. He's already done that.
He doesn't want to get to the second round.
No, the goal here is to win. And when you've got guys on your team like Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler and Nick Ehlers and Kyle Connor, these aren't 18-year-old, 19-year-old guys that you're hoping will hit their prime. Like they're in their prime now. Same thing goes for a guy like Josh Morrissey, right? So Connor Hellebuyck. So listening to both Maurice and Chevy, that's kind of what I heard more so with Maurice, like kind of just almost rationalizing why he makes these moves. But I think this is the whole issue here. A big reason, like if the Jets are, to take that next step, obviously, making moves in free agency is, and we'll talk about that later. Like I still think the biggest need here is, a right side defenseman. And Paul Maurice even talked about that, guys. Like if it's David Savard, Dougie Hamilton, like I would love to have one of those two guys, but you got to get a bona fide top pairing defenseman. And those guys could be bona fide top pairing defensemen. And, your point about the left side versus the right side, I think some people might think the right side is stronger with DeMello and Pionk and Poolman, but then you've got Heinola and Morrissey and Stanley there. But they're probably going to have to bring in a replacement for Derek Forbort unless they re-sign him. I'm not sure if they will re-sign him. But I think the point is here, guys, this year, even though you get to the second round and you sweep Edmonton, yeah, that's great. You probably, shouldn't have won that series that easily. It probably should have been more like a 6 or 7 game series. It was just the way Hellebuyck played and the fact that, you were able to get those goals in overtime. But like there is something broken here. It's not like, this was just a minor blip on the radar. Like when you lose that way to Montreal in the second round and you have a 7-game losing streak at the end of the season, there's something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I agreed wholeheartedly, Ezzy. I mean, and I say good morning to everybody joining us. This is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms. So great to see so many of you joining us in the chat. While you're here, please smash the like button. That's what we ask of you. Keep the comments nice and clean in the chat. You guys are doing a great job of that so far, but smash that like button. This segment of the show brought to you by Dr. Les Reikus and the team at Linden Market Dental Center, official dentist of Illegal Curve Hockey. Don't be an Ezzy. Always wear a mouth guard and give yourself peace of mind protection, as well as facial, teeth, and mouth protection. To make an appointment to get your teeth ting, visit lindenmarketdentalcenter.com. But you're 100% right, Ezzy. Look back at a couple of other interviews from this week, not the Jets. Nathan McKinnon, after they lost to Vegas, upset, fuming about how they haven't accomplished anything. This is his 8th year in the league, and he hasn't accomplished anything. And they got to the second round, same place the Jets got. Look at Sebastian Aho in Carolina, saying that the second round isn't good enough anymore. After they lost to Tampa Bay after having a great regular season. And then you compare that to what the Jets' comments were about how they accomplished so much this year, how great of a season it was. I mean, it's like a complete... It's like they have their bar for expectations of success is much lower than everybody else in the league. That's the only conclusion you can come to, based on the comments. I mean, it's just complete insanity to me. The difference in tone and the difference in opinion. And it's not like the year was a failure. So I'm not about to say that they should be...
Drew, just to qualify, you are talking the different... One is exit interviews. The other is post-game, post-elimination game.
Right.
So you should qualify it. So, I mean, it's not as if these guys, like you're talking about McKinnon and Aho right after they got eliminated. So there's going to be a difference between that sentiment versus
even on
guys who have had an opportunity to cool off. That's all I'm going to say.
Even after Monday night's game, you didn't hear anybody say anything close on the Jets. You didn't hear anybody say anything close to what Aho or McKinnon said about how disappointed they were, how big of a, how the year isn't good enough. You just never heard that tone come from anybody in the Jets organization or any of the Jets players. And you're right.
But I mean, Drew, I would, okay. So let's just take your comments. I mean, I'm not here to provide a defense for the Jets, but I will say, let's be realistic. None of these guys are just happy that they got to, eliminated by the Montreal Canadiens in the second round. They're not just happy that they made the top 8. You're always going to get spin. I mean, the reality is, like Paul Maurice, Kevin Cheveldayoff, people are calling for their heads right now. A lot of people, not everyone, obviously. So the truth is, these guys are in spin mode. I mean, that's what they're doing. It's essentially like they're just trying to spin it into a positive. So I'm not surprised they're not taking a dump all over their efforts this year. I'm not surprised they're not taking a dump on what happened, and they're trying to, look at it through rose-colored glasses because they know they're on the hot seat. I mean, that's just the reality. You can't look at what this team is, what it was, what the expectations were. So I'm just saying, it's not as if these guys don't have high expectations. It's not as if the ownership doesn't want to win. Obviously, people want to win. I just think what it comes down to is they just have. You just always take whatever they say with a grain of salt. It's like whenever Paul Maurice talks about injuries. Absolutely. That's why when Paul Maurice talked about Dylan DeMello, for example, and he gave us that insight as to what it was happening with Dylan DeMello after game 1 against the Habs. And I said, well, obviously he's probably not going to be playing in this series because Paul Maurice was very clear about what like a soft tissue injury. So if Paul Maurice is giving you clarity, well, that means that something's up. And then when we talked to Dylan DeMello, and he said during his exit, and he says, well, I suffered an injury that usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to heal. I was hoping for game 6 or 7 if we were being aggressive, but realistically, I was probably not going to play in that series. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that these guys are outright lying, but they're spinning, and it's not a surprise. And so you just have to. You can't just take what they say at face value. You have to listen to what they say. Right. But I'm just saying, it's not a huge surprise. I'm not surprised that the coach and GM, who have been the coach and GM for as long as they have. And, like Nikolai Ehlers is the only coach I've ever had. This is a very long tenure, and the expectations. I mean, the fan base is pissed. I read from people all the time how many season ticket holders are not renewing because of this. So they have to be aware. These guys know that essentially, I would imagine 2021-22 is going to be their last kick at the can, and if they can't do something significant, they're both out. That would be my expectation for next season.
But and I don't disagree with you, Dave, but I also don't get the impression from listening to Maurice or listening to Cheveldayoff that much is going to look different come next season. There's going to be obviously some tweaks to the roster like there always are. And, sure, Chevy's going to do whatever he can to try and acquire, improve players, be it via free agency or be it via trade. But it's like the ultimate, like the philosophy is not going to change, despite, I think, most people, independent and independent observers and otherwise, saying that something is not right, that there's a ceiling on where you're going to be as a franchise and as a team, given the way you deploy your roster on a night in, night out basis.
Sorry, Drew, as a quick aside, how much do you think Kevin Cheveldayoff is kicking himself not trading for Mark Stone?
Well, there's no question. I mean, you watch Mark Stone absolutely dominate that series, and you remember that he was when the Jets made that run, I believe it was the Paul Stastny year, if I'm not mistaken, when they got to the conference finals. I mean, Mark Stone on the Winnipeg Jets, especially if you can re-sign him. I mean, Mark Stone is one of the biggest difference makers in the NHL today.
He's a top 10 winger in the NHL. He's a Selke finalist.
Yeah, well,
that's all you need to know about Mark Stone. He's a top 10 winger in the NHL.
Right. And it's like they're, to some extent, paralyzed by indecision, that they think just the status quo continues to be okay. And you watch what Montreal did to them, and you watch how meekly they left against Montreal, and you'd be hard-pressed to ask anybody that watched that and say that there isn't something that needs to change here.
Yes, and I think, Drew, I was going to say, I think that's why there needs to be some major moves here. I'm talking about personnel. I'm not talking about, Paul Maurice and Kevin Cheveldayoff. They're clearly coming back next year, guys. Like, that was a big vote of confidence from Kevin Cheveldayoff. I mean, all the players gave Maurice a big vote of confidence. He will be the coach next year for the Jets. And then after that, we'll see what happens. But I mean, it was almost like that sweep against Montreal completely nullified what happened in the first round. It's like, okay, great. You swept Edmonton, but you didn't even put up a fight against Montreal. Like, you got dominated. You did not lead at any point in 4 games. That's extremely hard to do when you're a team like the Jets. Like, they didn't have one lead in 4 games. I still think that's incredible. And obviously, Carey Price has a lot to do with that. And the Montreal Canadiens as a whole, like, their top players, like guys like Philip Deneau, and, we talked about Corey Perry. He had a good series. Shea Weber was good in that series. But look I still think at the end of the day, the biggest need the Jets gave up way too many shots. They were outshot way too regularly. The one thing I was going to mention, 2 boys that I sometimes I agree with Dave. I mean, they're obviously always going to, spin things in a positive way. They're never going to throw any of their players under the bus. When Maurice talked about overachieving, I was watching that on my TV at home, thinking to myself, like, you guys were kind of exactly where most people thought you were going to be. And that's why I thought, what Mark Scheifele said was extremely puzzling.
Delusional?
Because I picked the Jets to make the playoffs. I picked the Jets to beat the Oilers. I picked the Jets to beat the Canadiens. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not the mainstream media, but I don't think I was. I mean, Weber picked the Jets to beat the Oilers in the first, Mark Spector, who else? We talked Gord Stellick, like a bunch of media personalities picked the Jets to beat the Oilers. So this notion that, the majority of the media, was against the Jets, I have no idea where that comes from.
Well, also, you
although I will give Mark Scheifele credit. He's now officially a Winnipegger. With nobody wants us to win, no one wants us to have success. I thought, wow, he's actually fully. And
he also bought a house.
And he bought a house, so he really is a Winnipegger.
Well, who did? I mean, to me, Mark Scheifele sounded eerily like Blake Wheeler in some of his comments, and a little bit of that, the attitude and the chip on his shoulder and everything else. And I don't have a problem with that, but I mean, at least it should be fundamentally rooted in something that in an accurate format, or in something in accuracy, and it wasn't. And that's sort of the problem that I had with a lot of Mark Scheifele's comments. Without further ado, we welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show our good friend from the Winnipeg Free Press, Mike McIntyre, joins us on the program. Mike, good morning.
Clean-shaven Mike McIntyre.
I was going to say, who is that handsome young man?
I got rid of the playoff beard, guys.
So you're looking good there, Mike. I mean, you got the beard is off, the weight is off. I got to say, you're looking handsome there, my friend.
My wife said to me, what happened to your lips? You don't have lips anymore. And my daughter, my 16-year-old daughter, God bless teenagers, when she saw me that I had shaved, her first reaction, guys, was, ew. So
nice to be loved, isn't it, Mike?
It is, yes.
Yeah. Obviously, Mike, we're talking about the Jets. We're talking about the exit interviews. To me, they just, really from player to coach to general manager, they sounded like an organization that thinks the status quo is acceptable. And for the life of me, I can't wrap my brain around that. And I just wanted you so I've read some of your columns. You have another one in today's paper and one from a couple days ago. It strikes me as bewildering how they seem to be. It's almost bordering on arrogance in my mind, the way they react versus what most other observers would say, the true state of the team is.
I like the word arrogance. In my column today, I kind of used the A theme where I talked about some things I didn't hear from the Jets. I talked about anger, accountability, and action, but I like the arrogance. That works well.
Feel free to use it.
Yeah.
I have another word for Drew, Mike, that starts with an A, but I'm not going to say it right now.
The family show, for sure. It's interesting. I mentioned the tone and how different it was out of, say, Colorado. And you saw Nate McKinnon, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a guy, Hart Trophy finalist. They won the President's Trophy. And just look at, he was spitting fire and talking about, we haven't won bleep, or I haven't won bleep. And contrast that with the messaging coming out of Winnipeg, where they haven't won bleep. And you're right, it was a very different tone. There was a sense of satisfaction. We even heard things like we overachieved this year. And, I guess, guys, some context is important. When you go back to maybe the beginning of January, there were a lot of people that didn't necessarily think this was a playoff team. So I guess if you're using that as the bar, I guess you overachieved in the eyes of some. But, I look at it this way. You have a Vezina Trophy winner in net, the best goalie in the league as judged, last year. You have arguably one of the deepest forward groups in the league, and you're spending to the salary cap ceiling. Should just making the playoffs and maybe winning a round. They obviously won the round this year. That's their third playoff series victory in a decade. Is that the bar now? And if it is, if that's what everybody's satisfied with, I guess good job. But I have to think that you got to be aiming a little higher than that. And I realize, guys, like the Vegas Golden Knights, it's a very different. They're in the same league with the same salary cap, but yes, the state tax and everything is different. But how can you not look at what Vegas has done? They haven't even blown out the candles on their fourth birthday yet, and they're playing in their third Final Four. When you look at where the bar maybe should be, like we look to a team like Vegas and say, my goodness, that's what you should be striving for.
And Mike, I wanted to ask you about, something that we were talking about, 5 to 10 minutes before you jumped on. There was a lot of talk. I wasn't on the Zoom call, I should mention that, but Dave was, and I listened to all 7 hours of combined, Zoom end of season press conferences.
That all it was? Felt longer.
About 37, 38 minutes each. So it was, around almost 2 hours. But there was a lot of talk, especially with Paul Maurice, about the younger players, and specifically Ville Heinola, Jansen Harkins, and we know that, like, it's not a secret here that Paul Maurice likes to play his veteran players over younger players. Right. But is his maybe unwillingness to change here and give an elevated role to a Christian Vesalainen, or give David Gustafsson that fourth line center spot? Like, is that a big problem here? Because, like, to me, that was really the only thing you could do in that Montreal series in Game 3, because obviously after Game 3 the series was over. But, like, if you're not going to play Ville Heinola, if you're not going to play David Gustafsson, like, Are they going to play another season in the Moose? I think we would all agree, like, these guys are ready for prime time. So do you think he has to be willing to change? Because if you really read into what he was saying, or not even reading into, he was quite literal. It sounds like, he isn't going to play that many first or second year players regularly next year.
Right. And, I asked him specifically about the idea, are him and Kevin Cheveldayoff on the same page? Because a lot was made, I think, out of Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments at the trade deadline that, we didn't land a big fish. We got Jordy Ben. I mean, he didn't say that, but that was the implication. But maybe we have, the help that we really need. Maybe it's already here. And the idea being that he was talking specifically about Ville Heinola and maybe even Dylan Samberg. Well, Dylan Samberg never got a whiff with the Jets this year, and Ville Heinola played 5 games, and I think only 2 after the trade deadline. I could be wrong. Maybe there was a third. But in any event, it would seem that the messaging was a little bit off there. And then I saw Elliot Friedman, I think in one of his 31 Thoughts, talked about that maybe there's in the offseason, that's something that Maurice and Cheveldayoff are going to have to kind of try and sit down and hash out. So it was interesting that, he said basically that we're on the same page. But I thought he sort of contradicted himself, talked in circles a bit. Like, he says on one hand that, we were thin on the blue line and that remains an issue. And then he talked about, how difficult it might be for Ville Heinola to crack the lineup, where he actually described the left side of the defense as stacked. I suppose it's stacked with hockey players.
Bodies.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's stacked with high-end elite talent that, is impenetrable. And again, you look at a team, I hate to bring up a team like Colorado again, but like they integrated a number of young players into their lineup kind of all at the same time. And I would argue it's paying off for them. I mean, I'm not saying that Ville Heinola is Cale Makar and you could go down the list, but, I guess I just think here we are now, one more season into Ville Heinola's time with the Jets. And Paul Maurice is talking about, we need to find who is the best partner for him would be. Well, are we any closer to really getting that answer based on how this year played out? No. And how are we going to find that answer out? Like, are we learning that just by having him on the taxi squad or sitting idly, by playing Jordy Ben over him? Like, is that how we're getting that answer? So, next year, it's going to be a full 82-game season. Life is not going to be any easier for the Jets. They're returning to the Central, and I don't know if you guys noticed, there's a few good teams in the Central Division who had nice seasons, Colorado being one of them, Minnesota as well. I expect St. Louis and Nashville and Dallas are going to be competitive, and Chicago's rebuilding. Like, is that the time that you're trying to find these answers? It sets the stage for a very interesting summer for sure. And, to see what the Jets might go out and try and do to address the blue line. And then certainly it sets the stage for a very interesting training camp.
Mike McIntyre is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Mike's appearance on the show is brought to you by Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty, official realtors of Illegal Curve Hockey. When 95% of your clients come via referral, it shows your commitment to honesty, integrity, and a total dedication to client satisfaction. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, come shake hands with Frank and Mauro Zappia online at zappiagroup.com.
Mike, this team seems to always be in a situation where you've got really good defense, your goaltending is suspect, and your forwards are young. Then you get an unbelievable goaltender, your defense is still good, your forwards are young, but they're getting there. Then all of a sudden you lose your entire defensive core, and now you've got older guys you don't really have, and you've got a good prospect group, right? We've talked about it. You've got Heinola, you've got Samberg, you've got Kovacevic, you've got Chisholm, you've got Stanley. Let's put him in that category. You've got a good group, a good crop of young guys, Gavanke. So you've got a lot of guys who are with the Moose. They just don't seem to be. That's the biggest problem with this Jets team, as far as I can tell, is that when the forwards were young, the defense was solid, and now their forwards are ready. Their goaltending is perfect. but their defense is young, those prospects. So if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, what are you doing? If you just think about this summer, are you willing to make a move, a splash, to be picking up somebody, to go after a Seth Jones, to try and get a Dougie Hamilton? What would you think in his mindset is? Because obviously Paul Maurice doesn't sound like he's ready to give some of these guys that opportunity.
Right.
And like I said, sometimes letting a guy like Johnny Kovacevic have that extra year isn't a bad thing, rather than rushing them into the NHL. But what do you do if you're the GM? Because again, Blake Wheeler is only getting older. He doesn't care. Right. Like, I remember once when we were doing a media availability with him, and someone asked him about, the Jets prospects. And all I can think about is he doesn't give a shit about the Jets prospects because that doesn't help him win.
No, you're right. He could care less who they take with the 18th overall draft pick this summer, because that player is not going to make any kind of impact during Blake Wheeler's time. And you could even go back a draft or two. I mean, maybe Cole Perfetti, gets in and plays a bit of a role before Blake is done. But you're bang on, Dave. And, to me, that's where trying to marry up all those parts of your team and get the mix, at the right time, that's where things like free agency and trades have to be a factor for sure. It can't just all be draft and develop, because I think you make a good point. You're maybe never going to have everything ripening at the same time if it's purely a draft and develop model. And so I think, you look back to the Patrick Laine trade, and I think a lot of us thought if the Jets were to ever trade Patrick Laine, they would do so to address a hole in their lineup. Now, second line center arguably has been a hole in their lineup, and Pierre-Luc Dubois arguably is that second line center, even though his play this year left a lot to be desired. So I won't completely suggest that Kevin Cheveldayoff sort of swung and missed on that one. I still have lots of time for Pierre-Luc Dubois. I still think there's a player there. And I think it's not like they traded Patrick Laine for another winger, although they used him as a winger at times this year. That being said, if you're going to move a Patrick Laine, is that where you would have really liked to see them bring in a stud number one defenseman? Well, we can't revisit that trade. It's done. It's happened. But, I wrote the other day talking about this core and what is maybe still a bit of a position of strength, if you're looking at the Jets, would be the wing. And so I threw out a name like Kyle Connor again. And his name's been out there before. Like if you're going to take a big swing and try and fill a need, is Kyle Connor a guy that you would consider? I mean, to me, I'm not trading Nikolai Ehlers under any circumstance. None.
He's like Elliot Ness, Mike. He's untouchable.
Right. Like him and Connor Hellebuck are going nowhere if I'm the GM. Mm-hmm. Everybody else I'd be willing to maybe hear offers for. But, so and probably you're not trading one of your core blue line. You're not trading Neil Pionk or even Josh Morrissey, I don't think, because again, you're trying to build your blue line. You're not trying to subtract from it. But if you're looking at making a big splash, and you don't think free agency is going to do it, I mean, yeah, there's some. You mentioned Dougie Hamilton, Dave. Like that's an interesting name for sure. I think Seth Jones. I personally love Seth Jones, the player. I just don't know. I know he's got a modified no trade, and I mean, if he wasn't willing to come here and sign long term, I don't think you're making that deal, anyways. But yeah, I mean, trading a part of that core, which, as you point out, is not getting any younger, and eventually that core is going to turn over a little bit with the likes of Perfetti and Gustafsson and the next crop of young forwards that are going to, Dubois, of course, you would hope would be part of that. Even Mark Scheifele's not getting any younger. Like he's 28 years old, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I think if you're the Jets, that's why this offseason is so important. There is a chance not to rebuild, but to retool. You have a lot of pieces in place, but for sure you just can't go into the next season by adding, no offense to these guys, but you can't just add another Derek Forbert or a Jordy Ben. Like that's not going to cut it. Or hope that Nathan Beaulieu is healthy next year. And like if that's your plan, you're probably planning to fail at that point.
I would agree with that. Mike McIntyre is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube. We're live on all of our social media platforms. Mike, given the way the Jets went out meekly, without much of a fight at all in the second round against Montreal, are you surprised that it was almost like a no-brainer for the organization to bring back Paul Maurice especially, and less so Kevin Cheveldayoff? Are you surprised that there was no real even consideration about the other options that appeared?
I'm not surprised, Drew. I mean, I think once they beat Edmonton, that probably cemented it. Had they been swept by the Oilers, maybe it's a very different conversation. But I think that bought some additional time, and you can argue whether that's right or wrong. I mean, you could also say that Connor Hellebuyck deserves a lot of credit for that, and maybe some puck luck that wasn't there in round 2. They did win 3 overtime games, and Connor Hellebuyck stood on his head in that series. .950 save percentage will make a lot of people look good. I just think there were enough just coming out of game 1 against Montreal. Not that the writing was on the wall. I still think that that's a winnable series, but obviously what transpired in game 1, I think, set the stage for enough, I don't want to say excuses, but that's kind of what they were, right? Mark Scheifele gone for the series. Dylan DeMello hurt 29 seconds into his first shift and gone. Paul Stastny didn't even play game 1 or game 2. Like, they had enough built into what suddenly went wrong that I think they could justify, the status quo when it came to the bench. And so I'm not totally surprised. I would think, though, guys, nobody would come out and say this. You have to think, though, the leash has gotten a little shorter, though, no? At the very least, I would.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100%, Mike. And the question I wanted to ask you was, I mean, there's so much that we could ask you about the player exit interviews, right? Like, obviously, and maybe, Drew or Dave wants to wrap up, the interview with the question about Scheifele and, what he was saying about how the media didn't have high expectations, which I'm not sure, if that was really justified. But I wanted to ask you about.
I picked them to make the playoffs, and I know a lot of people.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah. And I picked them to beat Edmonton and Montreal. So maybe I'm wearing rose-colored glasses, but certainly I know that we weren't the only people in the media, but we won't get into that right now.
I didn't. So on behalf of apparently everybody, I'd like to apologize to Mark for being so critical that they weren't going to make the playoffs. Mea culpa, Mark. My bad, buddy.
That's okay. I wanted to ask you about UFAs, Mike, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Jets are going to have 9 UFAs. It's either 8 or 9 UFAs, and the RFAs are significant as well, right? Like, we know there's a really good chance that the Jets are going to sign Neil Pionk to a long-term contract. Andrew Kopp, because of the history with Kurt Overcharge, sorry. We don't really know what's going to happen there. Like, is that going to be a shorter term deal? What are the salary? Expansion draft ramifications. But when you look at those UFAs, like you mentioned, Derek Forbort and Jordy Ben, and I think you would agree, there's a good chance that either both of those guys or one of those guys won't be back. Same thing goes for the Trevor Lewises and the Nate Thompsons. Good guys. They plugged in really good roles this year on the fourth line, but specifically the Paul Stastny, Matthew Perreault, like, do you see, first off, would you bring one of those guys back on a 1 or 2 year contract? And do you think the Jets will bring back either Stastny or Perreault?
I would bring certainly one of those guys, and I'm not even expressing a preference necessarily. I mean, I guess Paul Stastny, if you had to pick, just because of his versatility, although Matthew Perreault is very versatile as well. But I mean, Stastny's a center. That's an area the Jets, we know, have had some issues. It's all got to come down to price, though. Like, these guys, I'll put it this way: Stastny and Perreault would probably have to take a hometown discount to come back, and maybe they would. Maybe they like what they have going on. Certainly, one of the themes of the exit interviews from the players and Coach Paul Maurice was the camaraderie and how much these guys love playing together. I mean, if that's true, the Jets could certainly benefit by a Paul Stastny, deciding, I'll come back on a 1 year deal for a couple $1 million and work with your cap situation. as you point out, likely Andrew Kopp and Neil Pionk are in for significant raises this offseason. So you certainly can't bring Perreault and Stastny back at the same price point. I mean, that's a lot of money that's coming off the books, but that money is going to be spoken for in other areas, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think there's still enough game in both those guys. I'd caution, though, by saying this. If bringing those guys, holds down some younger players from even getting a sniff, then I'm not really in favor of it. I want to see some of these kids get a fair shake. And, Paul Maurice talked yesterday, for example, about this is where I mean about contradicting himself, where I'm not bringing some of these young offensive players in on the fourth line and playing them 8 minutes. Where did Christian Vesalainen play the other day? Didn't he play on the fourth line with Trevor Lewis and Nate Thompson? So
only 6 minutes though. So he's not a complete and total liar.
So, I mean, again, I think at some point, yeah, you have to say goodbye to what you had and maybe open the door for some of the new blood to come in. That being said, and knowing this organization, there's no question Paul Maurice has all the time in the world for Paul Stastny and Matthew Perreault. And I suspect the Jets will try to bring one or both of them back, but they can't get into a bidding war. Like if there are other teams out there that decide we need that player, and they have a lot more cap room, then you've got to let them go. You can spend that money elsewhere.
Mike McIntyre, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. It is Saturday morning. We're talking about the exit interviews from the Winnipeg Jets, both players and management.
Mike, and to that end of the idea of player interviews, I thought Mark Scheifele and Pierre-Luc Dubois speaking together couldn't have been a bigger contrast, because one was spitting fire and the other was talking about, almost contrition, almost feeling bad about how his season went. So what were your takeaways from hearing from those two and looking ahead to the future?
I was thinking about it after, Dave. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that those two were grouped together. Because I think the Jets would have known, like, let's put two guys who there's a tremendous amount of heat on. Let's trot them out together, and maybe they can almost take the edge off each other. It was just an interesting pairing to me. And you're right, the way what we heard from them was so different. Credit to Pierre-Luc Dubois for kind of standing in there and pointing the finger at himself. And, for his sake, I hope what he said comes to fruition. I hope that he uses this summer to kind of reset. Like, he's a guy who I think could really just use a mental reset here. And, let's hope that, as Paul Maurice and Kevin Cheveldayoff said, coming in a full training camp, all that, a summer behind him, that will benefit him. I do think there's still a very good player there. We just didn't really see it this year. As for Mark Scheifele, I don't know what that was, guys. I mean, that was bizarre to say the least. When I talk about, as I wrote in my piece today, some accountability, like, it would have been nice to hear something along those lines. Instead, we got a whole bunch of sort of woe is me, it's us against the world, a lot of feeling sorry for oneself. And look, I get it. I get that Mark Scheifele was frustrated. He was frustrated when he hit Jake Evans. He was obviously very frustrated by the NHL's decision and very frustrated to finish a second straight playoff on the sidelines. But, I mean, I didn't hear anything at all that would suggest he's taking accountability or acceptance for it. And, I like that Mark Scheifele maybe is motivated to come back and prove a lot of people wrong. Maybe that means we get a bit of an edgier, better Mark Scheifele starting next season. But, yeah, it was perplexing. And the whole idea of everybody kind of counting them out. I mean, like I said, a lot of people picked the Jets to be a playoff team. I also picked them to lose to Edmonton. So I'll wear that. But I think a lot of people did. But then I also picked them to beat Montreal. So the idea that they get no respect, I mean, they're beloved in Winnipeg, the market they play in. Yeah, maybe on a national level, teams like Toronto get a little more attention. But the whole woe is me act is getting a little thin, that's for sure.
Mike McIntyre covers the Winnipeg Jets for the Winnipeg Free Press. He's a columnist for the paper as well. Mike, always appreciate your time. Always appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for joining us. And hopefully we'll talk to you again between now and the start of the 2021-22 season. But if we don't, have a great summer and hopefully some time off with the family.
We're open to golf, Mike. As soon as we're allowed, let's hit it up. Let's do this.
KP,
yeah, Kildonan Park, wherever you want. Let's do it.
Kildonan Park celebrating its 100th later this summer. So yeah, I'm down for that as well, guys. I actually this is a nice way to start a week of holidays for yours truly. So was happy to join you guys, and yeah, have a great week. We'll talk again soon.
We'll see you on the golf course
every day, Mike. I promise.
Take care. There he goes. Thanks, Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press joining us here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Let's take our first commercial break. When we come back, much more about the Winnipeg Jets and their exit interviews. We're all about the Jets this morning. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go...
We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal, starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Ezra Ginsburg, Dave Manouk with you. This segment of the program brought to you by Bernstein's Deli, official deli of Illegal Curve Hockey and home of the Illegal Curve Sandwich. Located in the Cordon Village Mall, Bernstein's Deli has been Winnipeg's deli destination for over 30 years. For more information, find them on Facebook or at bernsteinsdeli.com. I am pleased to report that the renovations to the kitchen at Bernstein's Deli are now complete, and the great national nightmare is now over. The Illegal Curve Sandwich is back and available at Bernstein's Deli. Of course, the restaurant not yet fully open for dine-in, given the current restrictions, but you can certainly call Bernstein's, order your Illegal Curve Sandwich to go, maybe find a nice park or a nice place by the riverbank to sit back and enjoy some nature, and of course your delicious Illegal Curve Sandwich.
Love eating Illegal Curve Sandwich by the river.
Well,
it's my favorite thing. Then I jump in, take a little bit of a dip, and then dry off and then get on with my day. It's great. Sandwiches and swimming.
Sandwiches and swimming. You can't go wrong with those two things. That's exactly what I expected you to say there, Mr. Ginsburg. We've talked a lot about Mark Scheifele and some of his his exit interview comments. Let's hear a snippet from the Winnipeg Jets centerman, in case you've missed it, regarding the anger that Mark Scheifele continued to display towards the NHL Department of Player Safety. And of course, he followed that up by criticizing those in the media. Not sure if that was national or local or both, regarding their faith in the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, obviously I had, my chance to speak, my piece. In the hearing, I don't know how much was actually absorbed by them. It's a hard one. I think at the end of the day, you regret the outcome of it. I said that over and over. You never want to see a guy hurt, and I'm a guy that that respects this game and respects players, and I never want to see a guy hurt no matter what it is. But at the end of the day, I was trying to negate a goal. I'm coming back on the back check to prevent a goal and go back the other way. I've played 6-on-5 my entire life. I'm out there to score goals. I'm not out there to hit guys. I'm out there to try to prevent a goal and try to win the game. So I would have loved, an answer from them of what would have been a better thing to do. Cause I've replayed the thing over and over in my mind, and the only real thing is if I gave up on my teammates on that play and just didn't back check. So, it's over and done with. I'm not gonna continue to cry over it, but it's the decision they made. I still believe it was excessive. I still believe it wasn't. They knocked me out of the series. I don't even get a chance to play with my teammates and battle with my teammates in the series. For a guy with a clean record. So, I'm just going to stop talking before I get fined or something like that. So I'll just leave it as it is.
And I'm not the least bit happy Mark Scheifele addressing the media as part of his exit interviews, earlier this week. I mean, look, Mark Scheifele, hasn't really shown at any point. He's shown contrition for the fact that Jake Evans got injured. He certainly has shown that, but he has not for 1 second backed down from his point to the Department of Player Safety that he didn't feel it was a fair assessment and a fair judgment at what was handed down to him. Mark Scheifele isn't the young Mark Scheifele that we remember from when he got drafted, a decade ago. Mark Scheifele is a full-grown man, and he is certainly, I think, approaching things with more of an edge than we are typically used to seeing from him, is what I would say.
Yeah, and look, I'm not sure why Scheifele continues to be in denial. That's what I saw. I saw a player who is still in denial in terms of what he did. And he even said in the interview, this isn't verbatim, but in the interview, he even said, I didn't like the outcome. Well, what you shouldn't have liked is the act. That's what we're talking about here. And I got to say, I love Scheifele as a player. I think he's a great person. I think he's a leader. He's arguably a top 20 forward in the NHL. He's certainly, I would say is a top 20 offensive player in the NHL. But what he did deserved to be a suspension. I think 4 games was probably too much. But even if it was 2 games, I think we're missing the point here. And that's what I think you're getting at, Drew. The point isn't that you were suspended for 4 games. The point was that you were suspended, and what you did cost your team, not necessarily the series, but it certainly didn't help your team. And you're playing the victim card here. When you have a player who was stretchered off the ice and didn't, by the way, Jake Evans isn't going to be playing versus Vegas. You don't think, we should have some sympathy for Jake Evans? Jake Evans was having a breakout season with the Canadiens. This isn't a high pick. This is a guy who's a bottom 6 forward. Scheifele has to just move on and admit that what he did was wrong. And as far as I'm concerned, and I'll just finish with this, Drew, it has nothing to do with your record. If you decide to drink and drive, for example, which is reprehensible, the punishment is still going to be the same if you haven't drank and drive before. Like what the analogy I'm using here, guys, is like what he did was still bad, regardless if he's never done that in the OHL or the NHL or the AHL. And again, we're not talking about Scheifele's character or anything like this. We're talking about just that incident. And I realize there's a lot of frustration. Weber and Sean Reynolds talked about it on Kenny and Rennie. This is a guy that's only played one game, in the second or one, I guess less than that. He's missed a lot of hockey because of injuries, right? Like he missed the entire, Montreal series essentially, aside from one game. So he's upset that he's missed that much hockey, but that doesn't change the fact that what you did was, and this whole notion of like, what was I supposed to do? Not back check. No, what you were supposed to do, Mark, was not take a guy's head off after he'd already scored into the empty net. That's what you were supposed to do. It was a dirty hit. I don't know why we're even talking about this. He was suspended for 4 games. Like, guys, move on. This isn't the 1990s anymore where you can do this type of stuff. Like, he was suspended for 4 games. So it's a moot point whether he thinks it should have been a suspendable hit or not. As far as the 4 games versus 2 games, that's another thing. But I just think for his sake, I hope he changes how he views what he did, because what he did was wrong. It's not part of hockey, and he can't keep making these excuses, because I don't think it's going to be healthy for him mentally.
To me, regardless of what he believes, and that he's entitled to believe whatever he wants, and that's his problem. It was just another example of, I thought, what was the theme of the entire media availabilities, exit interviews from the players, right through, maybe not all the players. I mean, I thought Pierre-Luc Dubois was more introspective, but Scheifele and Maurice and Cheveldayoff and a lot of them. I mean, those guys are, the core, the leaders. I mean, with all due respect to Trevor Lewis and Nate Thompson, I didn't have a ton of interest in hearing from either of them at the end of the season, because they're likely to not be here next year, or they won't be here. They'll be in reduced roles. It was just the lack of any introspective, sober second thought, Dave, I think, from a lot of the core in this Winnipeg Jets organization, players and management. That is the theme that was my biggest takeaway from all this. Just that they couldn't think critically, and they couldn't think really, soberly. And then I don't mean in the intoxicated sense of the word, just regarding all of their post-season comments, that they were just all almost struck the wrong tone through and through.
Sure.
Drew, can you put up Trini KP's comment right there? Because I think I agree completely with what Trini KP is saying. I think, again, we're going to move on here. We've got Marty Baron coming up at 10:15, but I think some people are still fixated on this being a shoulder to head hit or shoulder to chest hit, or whether it was charging or not. You guys are missing the point here. He tried to plow through a guy who was finishing his empty net goal. It was the timing, and that's why Trini KP is 100% right. That was what was wrong with it. Yes, it was a charge. I mean, whether it's textbook definition of a charge, yes, he was trying to get back into the play and prevent an empty net goal. But I think we all agree that when we were watching that, we were thinking like, whoa, what was Scheifele doing there? Like, he comes in and he just absolutely crushes a guy, an unsuspecting hit. It was as much the blindside nature and what was happening in the game. The puck was in the net before Scheifele delivered that hit. So that's all I wanted to say. I think people have to get past this, like, it was a clean check. No, it wasn't a clean check. He was suspended 4 games. Like, Dave, it's over.
Again, my point.
You guys agree with that? Like, that's the way I look at it. Like, to me, again, I'm not saying it's the worst hit I've ever seen. It was pretty bad, though. Jake Evans left on a stretcher.
It doesn't matter. I mean, look, the hit is the hit.
Well, I mean, look, let's be realistic. If Jake Evans gets up, then we're not having this conversation, right? A lot of people are. I mean, do you want to talk about?
But it doesn't matter, though. It did happen. He did leave on a stretcher. So what does that even matter?
No. I'm just saying. But you're talking about I think a lot of people are saying that if he doesn't leave on a stretcher, then it's probably not as egregious as people are suggesting. But because of his history, that's what ends up happening. So look, at the end of the day, Ezzy, there's a lot of opinions. I've heard from a lot of people who have no problem with the hit. I mean,
I don't understand that, because I'm someone who loves the physical brand of hockey. I love big hits. You know, I like fighting, even though it's not as big of a part of the game. And I like Scheifele. But like, I think it was uncalled for play. I really think he was trying to. I personally believe he was trying to hurt him.
I just think it's just not as black and white as you know we're suggesting. I think that there's a lot of people, and like I said, I've heard there's former NHLers who don't have a problem with what Mark Scheifele did. So they played the game. I never played the game. I'm not pretending to. I'm allowed to have an opinion. Ezzy's allowed to have an opinion. Everybody in the chat is allowed to have an opinion about what they saw. Again, it's kind of like a witness. You know, 6 people could be witness an accident and have 6 different versions of what occurred. So it's not as if I to be honest with you, I don't give a shit what anybody wants to tell me. You're wrong. You're wrong. No, as he has an opinion, as he's entitled to his opinion. And if you don't agree with it, you're entitled to not agree with it. There's, like I said, there's former NHLers who are saying it's a clean hit. So those are the guys who played the game. They say it's a clean hit. They're entitled to it. You know, there's other NHLers who say it was a terrible hit. So my point is, I don't give a shit if you played the game or you didn't play the game, or if you played the game and you know, there's guys who played the game who have different views of that hit. So nobody is going to come in and say it's this way or it's that way. You have an opinion, which is your entitlement. End of story. So if you think the hit is terrible, then you're entitled to think the hit is terrible. If you think the hit is fine, then, and again, the key element to me is reverse it. Reverse the situation. Jake Evans hits Mark Scheifele, knocks him out. You know, what is your thought process? And so, you know, that you have to look at all elements of this situation. And again, I don't want to go too deep or down into it. I'm just saying I can see why Mark Scheifele is you can say he's not showing contrition, but if he doesn't, like, it's kind of like if he doesn't feel, especially, and again, we don't know what he's hearing from other people. Maybe he's hearing from a lot of NHLers saying that was a good hit. That was a good hit. We don't know what he's hearing.
What does it even matter, though, Dave? Like he's already missed the games. Like, what does it matter if you just continue to?
Because he's been labeled. I mean, he has been labeled with this thing, and he's being attributed his team's loss in the series.
If people think he's a dirty player, Dave, then that's ridiculous. Like, that's one thing. Again, and I'm not trying to, you know, be negative here or come down, but I guess it's tough when if you don't believe that was a dirty hit, then I can't help you.
Look, let's move on. I mean, we're clearly you're never going to get somebody to change their mind on this topic, and it wasn't really what I wanted to bring it up about. I just thought it was the tone all the way through most of the Jets media availabilities here. I thought the tone was wrong. Almost from most of the different from the players and from the coaches, a lot of the tone is what left me with such a sour taste in the post game media availabilities and the end of season media availabilities from the Winnipeg Jets. And we'll get into more of that throughout the course of this morning. We're pleased to welcome back to our program our good friend of ours. He's an analyst with TSN. He's an analyst with MSG. He's a good friend. Marty Biron joins us on the program now. Marty, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually at a barn with my girls. They're riding their horses, so it's a beautiful Saturday.
That is a beautiful barn that you're in. I got to say, most barns that I've been to don't have framed art on the wall.
This is the office. I rented the office just for you guys.
We appreciate it, Marty. You know that. That's first and foremost, top to bottom, what we appreciate about you. Marty, you know, obviously here in Winnipeg, we're spending a lot of our time looking back at how the Jets season ended. And you know, the highs of sweeping the Oilers in 4 games and then the lows of getting swept by the Montreal Canadiens in 4 games. You know, you undoubtedly watched the series. What were your thoughts about the Jets' performance, particularly in, I'm going to say, the lack of any fight after Mark Scheifele got suspended at the end of game 1? The way they went down so meekly in games 2, 3, and 4.
Well, I think that's what the Montreal Canadiens will do to you, right? They've now won 7 in a row, and they beat Toronto 3 in a row. And Toronto, that was the criticism. Where's the fight from Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner? And every time you look at them on the bench after a shift, it's like they're discouraged. Their shoulders are slumping down. And I think that's the Canadiens' way. That's how they play the game. They suffocate all energy, all the air that you have. And especially if the Canadiens can score first, and then it's even worse. If they have to play from behind, that's totally different. They're going to open it up a little bit. They're going to take chances, and then you're going to have some really good opportunities. But if you are playing either at even throughout the game or you're down a goal against the Montreal Canadiens, it's going to look that way. So I don't want to put all the blame on the Winnipeg Jets because I think we got to give really a lot of credit to the Montreal Canadiens. But, I mean, Scheifele not being there hurt the offense. Obviously, it hurt Wheeler and Connor. And trying to get that first goal or get up to a 2-0 lead against the Canadiens would have been important. But for me, the big hole and what was probably the biggest difference in the series is the loss of Dylan DeMello, who was really good in the first round with Maurice against McDavid and Draisaitl and playing that type of game. All of a sudden, you don't have that pair that you can rely on. It exposes your defense a little bit more, and we all knew that Winnipeg's defense was maybe their weaker point throughout the season if you look at how they're built on paper. And then Montreal feels like they have the confidence to go out and score goals right away. They started game with pressure, goal, and then it puts Winnipeg in that box. So I think there's a lot there that was going against the Jets' way. Not just the loss of Scheifele, but the loss of DeMello was a big one as well.
And Marty, just sticking with Montreal, we have to talk about Carey Price, right? Because I mean, you've played against Montreal, you played against Price specifically. Sorry, when you were in the NHL. I mean, I think you'd agree this matchup coming up between Montreal and Vegas. You're talking about two future Hall of Fame goaltenders, right? What have you seen through the first two rounds? In addition to Price obviously putting up 935, 940 save percentage, but that was the big kind of question mark going into the first round against Toronto was, can Carey Price be the old Carey Price, going back to, the 2014 Olympics, like 5 or 6 years ago. So is this just Price, playing at that level that he always has, but maybe, struggled with over the last few years? Has there been anything like in his approach? And do you think that, Price is going to be able to continue this play going up against the high-powered Golden Knights?
Well, playing against the Golden Knights is going to be a totally different animal to tackle right there. And Carey Price is a big game goalie. He is a big game goalie, and he shows up when you need him to show up. So the big thing with Carey Price that I saw in the first two rounds is that although he's very structured, and he relies on that structure, his positioning, his movements, his lateral movement especially, and being big in the zone, he battled extremely hard. And that was the one thing over an 82-game season, over the situation where, this year was 56 games, but he plays a lot of games. Sometimes the battle aspect goes off. It drifts away, and it becomes robotic Carey Price in net. And he just goes through the motion. But when it's big game Price, and especially in the playoffs, like last year in the bubble, beating Pittsburgh, and now this year, you see that it's not robotic. He's fighting through screen. He's battling. As so many times, I think there was one goal, one save he made. Oh, was it game 2 on Kyle Connor? Connor's in the slot in the third period. Carey Price pushed from his left to his right, and he's there, but he still battles and makes the save with the glove, right? In the regular season, that puck's in the net because he would have thought, I made my movement, I dropped down the butterfly, it beats me, no big deal. No, in the playoffs, you see a fighting Carey Price. In big games, you see a fighting Carey Price, and that just deflects off and it goes out, right? So that's the big difference. And playing with the lead, playing with confidence, that helps Carey Price fighting through all of that. Now, Vegas is going to put a lot more of a challenge for Price. There's going to be, Alex Tuck is going to be in front of the net. You're going to have Pat Chiaretti buzzing around. You're going to have Jonathan Marchessault, little water bug right around him. There's going to be so many challenges for Price, but I still think that he's going to put up a fight, and it's going to be pretty incredible to see what he can do against the Golden Knights.
Marty Biron is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning, 20 minutes past the top of the hour. We're live on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms.
Marty, how much of Price's performance in the playoffs do you think is attributable to the fact that Jake Allen played so much during the regular season, giving him that opportunity to rest? I think I saw a stat that said Jake played 17 of the last 21 games or something like that for Montreal. So how much of an impact is that having? If it ends up being the difference in getting the Canadians ahead, how smart does that signing look by Marc Bergevin?
Well, it has a huge impact. And really, the signing for Jake Allen was to be, and the trade for Jake Allen and the extension given to Jake Allen is to look ahead to 82 game regular seasons and say, Carey Price has to play 55. And you have to give, close to 30 games to Jake Allen. Now, the last 3 weeks to a month stretch in the regular season, Jake Allen played so much. Why? Because Carey Price suffered a concussion. So it was almost like you don't like to see concussions. You don't like to see injuries. But it would have been a situation where with the Montreal Canadiens were feeling the pressure from the Vancouver Canucks and the Calgary Flames. I don't know that Dominic Ducharme and Marc Bergevin would have been, we're okay to give Jake Allen all these games. Like Carey Price would have played a lot more if he hadn't been hurt. And he actually went down to play in the American League with Laval, to get himself ready for the playoffs. So he came into the playoffs well-rested, knowing that he was 100% healthy. It wasn't a question mark, like, is he over the concussion? He took a little bit more time, but that definitely had a factor on how he played in the first couple of rounds. Can he keep that up for 3 and maybe even 4 rounds? Yes, because he's on adrenaline right now, and you just keep going. You don't feel fatigue when you're in the playoffs like this, and I've experienced it. And you crash after the playoff. You go 2, 3, 4 rounds, you completely crash because now you're exhausted. But in the heat of the action, you keep on going. But I think leading up to the playoffs this year, the forced rest because of the concussion or the upper body injury that Carey Price suffered, then that allowed him to be much more rested for the playoffs.
Marty Biron, our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Marty, when the post-game exit interviews happened here in Winnipeg, I think a lot of people were surprised at the tone that was set by the players to some extent, and certainly by Paul Maurice and Kevin Cheveldayoff. There's certainly, for a lot of people, they seemed very sort of happy to have accomplished getting to the second round, and that was almost acceptable, good enough for the team. To each and every player really spoke positively about Paul Maurice and his impact in that dressing room when they spoke on Wednesday. And then Maurice obviously spoke yesterday. From my perspective, my question to you would be, as a guy who's been in dressing rooms, who spent his entire career, as a player in dressing rooms, when does a head coaching message get stale? Is there a sort of a lifespan for a head coach? I mean, you look at the best of the best, and they usually last maybe 10 to 12 years. And Paul Maurice is rapidly approaching that 10-year mark. And I don't think anybody would think of him as the best of the best. So when does that messaging get stale?
Well, first of all, I love Paul Maurice. I think he's fantastic. I think he could be in the conversation with the best of the best coaches in the National Hockey League right now. Now, most coaches usually 2, 3, 4 years, you're thinking, okay, that message is starting to you need to have a different approach. I was in Buffalo from the time I came into the Buffalo Sabres until the time I got traded, was 8 years, and I had Lindy Ruff for 8 years. Now, there was the different circumstances. We went through 2 ownership, so they wanted to keep the group in place and not, come in and completely change everything. So that allowed maybe Lindy to stay there a little longer. But I enjoyed having the same coach and the same message for a long period of time. You don't have to overthink it. There needs to be adjustments, yes, and the approach has to be different, absolutely. Sometimes it's a systematic change in the way you play the game, but I did like having the same coach for a longer period of time. I've had really 5 coaches in my career. Lindy Ruff in Buffalo. I had John Stevens in Philadelphia for 2 years. I had Scott Gordon with the Islanders for a year. John Tortorella, 3 years, and then I retired when I started the season with Alain Vigneault. But I could have stayed with Torts for 8 years. I could have stayed with Lindy Ruff for 8 years, 10 years. I liked their messaging. I thought it was simple. It was clear. Everybody knew where they were at. If Brad Richards came into the locker room, he had Torts before, or just by talking to the players, he knew exactly what was demanded out of him. It wasn't, what's this coach want? What is the new coach going to want? Like, where do I stand? So I think to build consistency, it's really good. Now, I agree with you on the tone. Like, if you lose to the Toronto Maple Leaf in the second round because the Leafs are the better team, okay, yeah, we did good. We beat Edmonton in the first round, and we ran into the Leafs. They didn't run into the Leafs. They ran into the Montreal Canadiens. So that, to me, is where I think you need or you should want more. Like, it should not have been a sweep against the Montreal Canadiens. And really, to be honest with you, that, in my opinion, is a Winnipeg win. Now, I understand Scheifele, Stastny not coming in until game 3. There was some obstacles, but still, I think you got to beat the Montreal Canadiens to say, hey, this was a success. You can't just feel this a successful season because you got to the second round.
Following up with that, Marty, and you talk about, schematic changes and things like that. And here in Winnipeg, we look at Paul Maurice, and it's almost like the system year after year hasn't really changed, and his approach year after year hasn't really changed. So when you played for coaches for multiple years at a time, how often would they maybe change their approach or change their way of thinking from one year to the next? How often did they change how they would strategize depending on the roster that they would have from one year to the next?
I think it probably happens every 4 or 5 years where there's a bigger change in the way you do things. And maybe that when I started in 99 with the Buffalo Sabres, 5 years later was the 04-05 lockout. When we came out of the lockout, Lindy Ruff was like, we're changing everything. Like, we're not trying to win games 1-0 anymore. This is going to be a fast pace, no red lines, stretch the ice. Like, so everything was changed. But I also think of, like, when I was with the Rangers my first year, like, we had this mentality. It was a defensive game. It was Ryan Callahan, Dan Girardi. It was trying to win games 2-1. And then all of a sudden you ended up acquiring Brad Richards, and then Marty St. Louis came in. And then, you're making a change towards, hey, we can open things up a little bit. And that's what Alain Vigneault did. But I think Torts was getting to that place before he got fired, and then they went to a different coach. So I think every 4 or 5 years, usually there's a change. It could happen sooner depending on your personnel. But coaches, they go from team to team, and they usually bring their core of systems with them. Claude Julien, Boston system, New Jersey system, Montreal system was very much the same. He adjusted a little bit, but I think most often coaches want the team to adjust to them as opposed to the coach adjusting to the team. So that's a really tough balance to be able to achieve.
Marty, I wanted to ask you about the East Final between the Islanders and the Lightning, and it kind of fits into what we've been talking about here for the last 5 minutes or so. You've got arguably two of the best coaches in the game right now with John Cooper and Barry Trotz, and their resume speaks for itself, right? Like the amount of wins, playoff rounds, Stanley Cups.
Yeah.
How are you kind of looking at this series? Because you've obviously got the Lightning going for the the repeat. They're completely stacked. Like Dougie Hamilton called them the $18 million over the cap team. Like you've got Kucherov, Stamkos, and Point just completely tearing up the two teams they just played. Like, are you seeing this going to 6 or 7 games, or like just kind of what's maybe the most intriguing thing to you about this series?
So I think for me, that's Tampa and 5. And I'm only saying Tampa and 5 because I think if Tampa get themselves going right away, now all of a sudden the New York Islanders are going to be chasing, and they're going to be like, this is going a little bit faster than what we'd expected and how it's been the first 2 rounds. But if the Islanders can claw themselves and just put their hooks into Tampa Bay right from the start, it will be a long series. I still think Tampa will win. They've been there. They now added last year Coleman and Barclay Goodrow, and they have Pat Maroon. They have a little bit of a different element to their game. Now, the weird things and the difference in coaching between Barry Trotz and John Cooper is Barry Trotz sticks to what he likes. 4 lines. I roll my 4 lines. You criticize me because Leo Komarov is playing with Barzal and Eberle. I'm going to keep it that way, even though maybe Palmieri is a better fit up there. But I want a good first line, a good second line, a good third line, a good fourth line with our identity. And I'm going to play everybody, 12 to 18 minutes, and that's the way it's going to go. John Cooper likes to sometimes go 11 forwards and 7D. Why? Because he'll play 3 lines. He'll double shift Kucherov. He'll double shift Point. He'll throw everything at you. He'll make changes on the fly in games. Right now he's got 12 forwards, 6D. But his fourth line doesn't play a whole lot, and that's okay. It's Johnson, Tyler Johnson, Ross Colton, and Pat Maroon, but they could, if you wanted them to. I don't think you want them to go head-to-head with the Martins, Zizekas, and Clutterbuck line, but it's going to be interesting where Trotz is going to roll his lines and Cooper is going to say, Point, you go again. Like, I wanted you on another shift. It's very two different train of thought, and it's going to be interesting if you like those matchups right from the first game. What happens? The Islanders are going to go into Tampa game 1. I think the Islanders are going to start their fourth line. They're going to want to send their identity line out there. Is all of a sudden John Cooper sending Pat Maroon's line, or is he going to go and put Braden Point on the ice? That's going to be really interesting.
Marty Biron is our guest on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show Saturday morning. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms. Marty, of course, is an analyst on Buffalo Sabres broadcasts on MSG, and of course the work he does with our friends at TSN.
Well, Marty, we're just happy you're not having to steal Wi-Fi to be able to do today's broadcast.
I was stealing it from somebody I know, so that was okay. I'm still stealing Wi-Fi because that's not my place, but it's
you're not in the woods. Yeah, you're not in the woods. You're not lost in the woods. No, Marty. So if you have to put on your hat, how do you see this playing out? Do you see it? Well, how do you see the final, and what team do you think ultimately ends up claiming this?
Well, ultimately, I think it's Vegas, Tampa, and funny thing. So when Vegas entered the league, I picked them to lose in the first round, day one. I picked them to lose in the second round, day one. I picked them to lose in the conference final, day one. And I picked them to win the finals, they lost, right? And I was like, well, this is how it happens, right? So this year, I picked Montreal to lose in the first round, they win. But Montreal to lose in the second round, they win. I picked Montreal to lose this round. Is that going to happen again, where they're going to be out there and winning a semifinal that they shouldn't win? So my picks are not always the best. Now, I can analyze it, but I just can't predict it. That's the difference. So I would assume Vegas, Tampa are going to meet in the finals. They're the two better team, the two best team left. And I think it's going to be fun to watch that. But it wouldn't surprise me if Montreal upset at Vegas or the Islanders upset at Tampa. I think this is going to be a quick semifinal. I have Vegas in 5 and Tampa in 5. But I wouldn't be surprised, just because we've learned so much now, and sometimes we want to close our eyes to what's just happened. But how did Montreal, upset Toronto and Winnipeg? Because they have a great goaltender. They have a top 4D that can play heavy defense, and they don't turn the puck over. And all of a sudden, they've got great unexpected scoring from Tyler Toffoli and Cole Caulfield and Kotkaniemi, Arturi Lehkonen. So you're like, hey. These are all the makeups of a great team, right? Look at the Buffalo Sabres of the late 90s. They had Dominik Hasek. They had a solid group of defensemen. They just didn't have anybody up front that was superstars. They had Michael Pekka and Dixon Ward, and, you're going to be like, oh, Curtis Brown. Stu Barnes came in. It wasn't great. But they had a recipe that worked for them, and Montreal has that also. So it's going to be interesting. It wouldn't surprise me if Islanders or Montreal upsets Tampa or Vegas. But I still think, I'm in an area right now where I could put a couple wagers online, New York State won't allow it, but New Hampshire, that's where I'm at right now. They do. So if I had some money to put on, I'd put Vegas, Tampa in the finals, but I'm not super confident. I'm saying it's a 60-40 in my mind that it happens.
Marty Biron is a great friend of our program. He's a great analyst on MSG and for TSN. Marty, I guess last question for you. Come October, Jack Eichel is wearing the jersey of what team?
You had to do it, Drew.
I had to do
it, but I'm not controversial. I still think he's a Buffalo Sabre, and okay. maybe he's not ready for the start of the season because it's still that holding pattern now. His rehab is over. His conservative rehab is very quiet on both the Sabres and the Jack Eichel side about what's next. Is there a decision on a path, maybe a surgery or not? What's going on? We don't know. It's very quiet. But I still think that, number one, you can't just trade Jack because you're like, we got to make a move, right? You have to get the right return. Well, how many teams can give you the return that Jack Eichel would fetch? That is a big problem. $10 million on the cap. How many teams can make that $10 million fit? And the injury. How many teams are going to say, okay, we're going to fit a $10 million player. We're going to give you, first overall, first picks and top prospects and players that are right now in our roster, but we don't know if he's going to be 100% healthy. So unless the Sabres get the right return, I don't see it happening or happening soon. I know everybody's talking about, the experts are saying it's not Jack Eichel's not going to be in Buffalo. He's not going to be in Buffalo. I still think that he will be. There's one more year before he's got his no movement clause kicking in. I think if there's a move, it's going to be in 10 to 12 months from now. But I still think in October he's with the Sabres.
Marty, thank you. Always appreciate your time. Always appreciate your insight. Have a great summer until we do this again, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Take care.
Thanks,
there
Marty.
he goes. Marty Biron, great friend of the program, great analyst with his work with MSG and, of course, TSN. Let's take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to play Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Hold on. We've got a gift coming.
A gift?
Yeah, we have a gift. I'm presenting Ezzy with a gift that he doesn't know about.
Oh my gosh. I don't know about it either.
No, you don't either. It's from one of our people in the chat I actually saw him in the chat earlier. So
is it new deodorant?
I'm not telling you what. No, that would be for me. But no, we've definitely got something coming for Ez.
I really hope it's cheesecake.
I'll give it to Ez.
I love cheesecake.
I'll give it to him during the break, but he'll open it on air.
No, just you can, yeah, okay, that's fine. He can't open it until we come back from break. So stay tuned as he's ungifting things. I don't know what it's going to be, but
better
may God
not be a
have mercy on.
Dave.
It's not a regift. It was ordered for you, Ezzy.
Wow, custom.
Now very custom. I may have snuck a peek, but it's very.
I have
custom.
no idea what it is, by the way.
Stay tuned. This is exciting. This is either going to ruin us or it's going to be amazing. What? No ifs, ands, or buts. Nothing in between. You're watching. You're listening. You're chatting with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. We're live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whiten my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs from restorative to cosmetic dentistry and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly, see lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
It's present time here on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Before Ezzy opens up whatever surprise Dave Minuk has in store for him, I want to
Dave Minuk. I'm just the facilitator.
Fair enough. The middleman, Dave Minuk.
It was addressed to Dave, by the way. This present here. Here it is. I have no idea what's in this box.
No, don't show the address, Ezzy.
No, show the address. Make sure, give out the alarm code, give out everything, anything so that people can have easy access to Dave's house.
Drew, I'm a little bit concerned, though. It seems to be ticking, so I don't know if I should necessarily open this.
That's fair. I mean, I'm not sure why it's shaking all over the place, but that's a separate issue altogether. I do want to mention this segment brought to you by Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, officially declared the funniest place in Winnipeg by Illegal Curve Hockey, bringing you North America's top-rated comedians to Winnipeg for the past 35 years. Celebrate your upcoming birthday with great deals for you and all of your friends. For more information about Rumors, and I can assure you they are desperately waiting to reopen, and they're going to do so as soon as they can in 100% safe a manner. For more information, go to rumorscomedyclub.com and take it from us. Try the nachos.
I can't wait, Drew, until the three of us, our families are able to sit down and watch stand-up comedy at Rumors. Like, think about, I think we'd all agree we've seen so many good stand-up comedians there, right? Like, I remember, we saw Rob Schneider there. I mean, we've seen the who's who of comedy have played at Rumors. But can you just imagine how good it's going to be when we're sitting there? It's almost like that's when we know life is back to normal. That's the way I look at it. Those
except
types
you
of
assume that
experiences.
Drew would actually go with you, Ez.
Well, no. I mean, I would sit at
As he only likes to go to Bomber games, does he?
I'd sit at opposite ends of the table from Ez, but I would certainly sit next to his lovely wife. I mean, she's wonderful. I mean, mistakes made notwithstanding, but that's a separate issue altogether.
I think the last comedian we saw with Naomi and I was Donnell Rawlings.
There you go.
Oh, he's good.
Yeah,
he is
from the
funny.
Chappelle Show.
He was very funny. You're absolutely right. But, I was talking, as it happens, I was talking about Rumors with somebody this week. And, because comedy is best sort of in tight corners where you're shoulder to shoulder next to the person next to you. And again, laughter, ha-has, big, there's some mouth breathing going on when you're at a comedy club. But you're right, Ezzy, that would certainly be a sign that we are closer back to normal when you can sort of feel comfortable in those kinds of situations. And I know in my conversations with the good folks at Rumors, they're doing everything ahead of time. They're getting prepped up fully so that when they can reopen, they're going to do so in as safe as a manner, and so that the audience in attendance feels as though they are in a perfectly safe environment. Please, without further ado, open whatever it is in that box.
Okay, so it's not a huge box. I mean, I was thinking maybe North End Rick sent me some pierogies from the North End, but here, see what this is. I have no idea what it is. It's not very heavy.
Holy Dinah, just open it.
Okay, I have no idea what.
That's just to hold it up. Okay, come on.
Okay, so let's see what it is here. Oh, is this? I think I might know now what it is. Is this going to be Is this going to be Anna Kournikova?
Better.
Okay, who is it? Is it?
Samantha Fox.
Wow.
Ty in the Brokery.
I don't know if my wife is going to enjoy me putting this up in the office. So maybe I'll have to just, have it hanging in my car or something. But so who is this from?
What do you mean, Ty?
It's from Ty and the Brokery.
Oh, it is Ty and the Brokery. Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ty.
Remember, as per our discussion, you didn't know who Samantha Fox was.
This is going to go somewhere very prominently in my house. It might actually go in my bedroom.
It might go in the tent that you're going to be living in your backyard if you put that up anywhere in your house. That's for sure.
Ty says it's for the kitchen.
It's for the kitchen. Okay.
This is beautiful. This looks expensive. Like this isn't low quality. Like this is a top-notch graphic.
Material.
That a boy, Ty. I appreciate it. Now I have to get to Ty something. When's Ty's birthday?
Well, you have to get him the Anna Kournikova poster. I think if we're going to go full circle with this ridiculousness, I need
Ty's address. I don't know if Ty wants to give it to me, but.
I was sort of hoping that it was hoping that it was an Ethernet cable, so as he could plug in his internet. But I guess there's no post game shows until October, so he's got a few months before that.
I got to be honest. Aside from the birth of my two children, this is the best gift I have ever received.
You got married, for God's sakes, man! We want you to stay married.
I don't even know if that's top 5. I would say my CPAP machine.
Thanks to Ty. That was very nice for him to obviously pay attention during our show.
Where do we go from here, Drew? I don't know how you segue out of this right here.
Well, we're going to go to we're going to hear from Pierre-Luc Dubois. That's where we're going to go from. He, I thought, was very honest, and I appreciated his honesty during his end-of-season media availability. So while we're chuckling along with Ty giving that great gift to Ezzy, let's hear from the Winnipeg Jets. I'm going to say he was much maligned because he was a little maligned given his performance this year and the tone that he struck regarding his season, his first season here in Winnipeg. Here is Winnipeg Jets. I'm going to say center, but I'm also going to say winger, ? Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Oh, I should have. I didn't play how I thought I could and how I know I can. It was a disappointing year for me. There was a lot of ups and downs. But there's the only person to blame is me. It wasn't easy, but like Scheif said, in life there's setbacks. This summer is going to be a big, important summer to get ready for next season, next training camp, and to get it going when we're back.
Go back to Paul Friesen for a follow-up. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm just wondering what you attribute it to, Pierre-Luc. I know you had the tough start where you had to quarantine, and did it just never get on track for you after that, or is there something else?
To be honest, it's when I look back at this year in the future, I'm gonna look back and think that there's not much I didn't go through. From the 2-week quarantine, coming back, getting injured, then playing. We didn't have a lot of practices, so kind of hard to get in that rhythm. It wasn't easy when you get to a new team. You want to fit in. You want it to be the perfect fit. For me, it was kind of hard finding what that was. I had a hard time, trying to find what I can do. Like I said, it's at the end of the day, it's our job to be the best players we can be and to help the team win. And it was hard for me this year to adjust. Given a factor, many reasons I think, but at the end of the day, you only have yourself to blame. And I know I can be better. I can be a lot better. This year was my 4th year in the NHL, and I'm really happy with my first 3 years. And 1 year doesn't define you. My confidence of who I am and what I can do, don't change just because of one disappointing season.
We'll go next to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Pierre-Luc. I'm wondering, getting traded for a player that was beloved in this market, I'm sure that comes with a lot of pressure, wanting to succeed the way that, I can hear it in your voice. You wanted to, coming to a Canadian market like this, where the microscope is just that much more. How much pressure did you feel this year to try and succeed, and how may that have played a role?
No, to be honest, I'm not. The people that know me best, they know that I don't really, feel a big amount of pressure from the people on the outside. Like I said, I'm someone that puts a lot of pressure on myself, and I have high expectations of myself. And I know that, fans and media, have expectations of yourself too, but nobody knows me better than myself. And when you push to be the best you can be, every practice, every game, and it doesn't go your way, it's frustrating. And it's not easy at times, but I don't really believe in the added pressure, the extra pressure from people on the outside. Like I said, I know what I can do, and I know who I am as a player and who I am as a person. And, I know I come to the rink every day trying to be the best player I can be the best person I can be. And I don't need extra pressure or extra motivation to try to do even better than that. I know, my goals are to be the best player I can be for this team.
That was Winnipeg Jets center/winger Pierre-Luc Dubois. And he was honest, and I appreciated the honesty that he displayed in his end of season availability. And he talked about, not really ever finding the fit or getting comfortable this year in Winnipeg. And certainly, I think there's an element of that had to do with the quarantine and then the injury, and then that sort of awkwardness, how you sort of start and then you stop and then you start and then you stop your season. But I do believe if you sort of, I'm not necessarily reading between the lines, and this might just be my interpretation, but I think that his usage and how he wasn't certain if he was going to be a winger some days and a centerman other days. I think his usage probably also impacted his performance this year when you're not sure sort of where you slot in and in what role you slot in. I think that probably had an impact as well on what was undoubtedly a very poor season for Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Yeah, and I think Dave would agree with this. Like Dubois' future, you got to remember he's 22 years old. And yes, he's been in the NHL. What is this, his fourth year, Dave, if I'm not mistaken? Right? Because he's 1 year behind Laine. I mean, his future is very bright. He didn't play very well. And I feel like his season really never got off to a good start in Winnipeg. Not talking about Columbus, because obviously he didn't play a lot for Columbus, but the corner, that must have been hard, right? Like we remember he was doing all of that media, because what else was he going to do when he's sitting in a condo or house or apartment, wherever he was? So I just think like he didn't get off to a good start. And he started to improve as the season went along, but certainly, in the playoffs, it just seemed like a guy, at least this is my own opinion, boys, like he was just struggling with, confidence, and he was struggling, psychologically in terms of, his own performance. So yeah, like I'm not worried about Pierre-Luc Dubois. Like I still think that was a good return for the Jets. Like, could they have got more for Laine and Roslovic? Maybe. But the trade is what it is, as they say. So I do think, having, as Mike McIntyre talked about, having a summer off, being able to get away from the game for a bit. These guys obviously don't get away from the game that much, right? Like you heard Logan Stanley say that. Yeah, Logan Stanley said like, I'm going to take a week off. I was thinking to myself, like, Logan, like you played a lot of hockey this year. Like, spend some time at the cottage. Like have a few Crantinis. Like jump in the pool. But I mean, obviously, there's a reason why these guys get paid millions of dollars to play pro hockey. Whereas I only get paid millions of dollars to be on a legal curve, right? So
as long as you're accepting your payment in posters, then you'll be fine.
No, I appreciate the Triscuits that I get. I don't need anything else. So I mean, look at Dubois is going to be a really good player for the Jets down the middle. I agree with you, Drew. Like you got to decide: are you going to use him as a center or as a winger? I think, considering where the Jets were at, it made sense to have him on the wing and have Stastny up the middle. But I think we all agree. I mean, he's a natural center. He's got to play center. But I'm not too worried about, where his future is heading. But yeah, it was definitely disappointing. The Jets could have used more offensive production from him, especially in that Montreal series.
Dave, is it important no, I'm talking about the exit interviews between, Paul Maurice and Pierre-Luc Dubois, the ones we're not privy to. Is it important from your perspective that Dubois sort of has some clarity as to the role the team feels he should be playing next season, so that he knows, what to expect come the start of training camp?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I'm with Ezzy, and I'm on board with that idea that I think that you haven't seen the player that the Jets have yet in Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think, give him the summer to reflect, get trained, get ready, have the training camp with the Jets. And I think you're going to see a very different, very much more motivated, of course, final year of his deal. And looking for a long-term deal, I would imagine at that point. But I think you're going to see a much more motivated Pierre-Luc Dubois. I think you'll see him playing second-line center. We know the news on Brian Little doesn't look good in terms of his ability to ever return to the NHL. Kevin Cheveldayoff said, I don't remember his exact quote. I have it here somewhere. He said he's not available to us when he was asked for an update on the Veteran Jet Center. He said there's no medical opinions that he should play. So you don't have Brian Little, Paul Stastny, question mark, whatever. The reality is you got Pierre-Luc Dubois to give you that center depth that is supposed to make you the envy of the NHL. Mark Tuckley is your first-line center. Pierre-Luc Dubois is your second-line center. Adam Lowry is your third-line center. And question mark is your fourth-line center. Probably should be David Gustafsson. That's my opinion, but regardless. So right now, but you didn't bring Pierre-Luc Dubois in to be Patrick Laine on the wing. You brought him in to give you that center depth. Mm-hmm. So you're going to use him as a center. You're going to give him that opportunity in summer. He's like I said, people were looking for some sort of reason. And you know what? He didn't offer up excuses. That's the one thing you want to give the guy credit for. Yeah. He just said, look, I take ownership. I wasn't dealing with anything. People were like, oh, well, that means, and I've seen all this stuff, all this outside noise about what's going on with him and stuff like that. And
it's just so irresponsible.
It's so much crap. Like the fact that people put this crap out there, I just don't even, I'm not going to give it any sort of credence, but like, it's pretty insane that people have nothing better to do than put stuff on the internet and just like hope that it'll go viral. Like, guys, there's better things to do with your time than that sort of crap. So I'm not here to be Pierre-Luc Dubois' defender. I just think that the kid has a ton of talent. I think I agree with him. I don't think 1 year defines him. I think it's on him. It's incumbent on him, and he's going to be motivated, right? Because like I said,
he had 27 goals in his first year in the NHL with the Blue Jackets.
That's right.
There aren't a lot of guys that can put up 27 goals. And let's not forget, it's not like Columbus was a powerhouse, right? Like, so look at who
I think he was playing. He was playing with the bread man at that point.
He was playing with Panarin, and I think that is a fair comment. That people can make. That they wonder. You look at those 27 goals, Ezzy, to your point. How much of that was a factor of playing with a talent the likes of which of Artemi Panarin. Now the Jets do have some talent themselves. They have talent. If it ends up that let's assume that Connor and Wheeler and Scheifele are together because they always are. Let's assume that it's Ehlers playing with Dubois. And then figure out the other side, of course. If it's Ehlers and Dubois, there's no reason why that shouldn't succeed. If that with the knowledge that that's going to be a consistent group and a consistent pairing, and Paul Maurice talks about the need to find Ville Heinola a partner on the right side, which whatever.
It's Josh Morrissey. That's the number one. Sorry to cut you off, Drew, but that's to me has to be number one. And it was talked about. Like in a roundabout way by Maurice and Cheveldayoff. That's what you need to. We know, Tucker Pullman is not a top pairing right side defenseman.
DeMello and more. I mean, assume that they protect DeMello, and we'll talk about the expansion draft throughout the course of the next few weeks, of course, leading up to it. But if you assume that Morrissey and DeMello should be your top pair or should be paired together, then there's no reason why Heinola and Pionk shouldn't be able to see if they have similar chemistry to what Pionk and Forbort have.
I think Heinola and Pionk would be a great pairing.
I mean, I don't know that why Paul Maurice made it sound like it's this great big Rubik's Cube of a problem to try and find somebody that's going to be able to play with Ville Heinola, really a smooth skating, puck moving defenseman. I think a lot of guys can generally play with those guys.
Right. And going back to Dubois, it was actually, I should, correct myself. And I do know that I make mistakes, but, we're talking about a lot of players and a lot about years. I just checked Hockey DB. It was Dubois' second year that he scored 27 goals, but you're right. It was with Panarin, but my point, I think, still is valid here. He had, 18 goals. I'm just looking at it now, 18 goals, 50 points in 70 games. His last full year with Columbus. He didn't have Panarin then. Right. Yeah, so who was he playing with? Who's he playing with? Like, I want to say he was playing with maybe Oliver Bjorkstrand and Cam Atkinson. I'm not sure who his wingers were for the majority of the season. I'd have to go back and look. But the point is, Dubois is a good player, guys. He didn't just have one good year with Artemi Panarin. This is a guy. There was a reason why Columbus took him third overall over Jesse Puljujarvi. And by the way, I still think if you redid the draft, I'm pretty sure you would probably redo it exactly the same way. Matthews would go 1, Laine would go 2, and probably Dubois would go before Puljujarvi. Yeah, Puljujarvi had a decent year with the Oilers. It's not like he scored 60 points this year, though. So, look at Dubois got a very bright future ahead of him. Does he need to work on a few things? Yes, I think he does need to work on his play with the puck and his decision making. But all the tools are there, guys. Right, 6'2", 210 pounds or 6'3", whatever he is. I mean, the guy he's got if you wanted to go into a lab and put together a power forward in the NHL's body, it would be Pierre-Luc Dubois, right? So, I mean, all the tools are there. And I do think that, he's going to have a much better season next year.
I think that you would be, writing him off would certainly be an error, I think, at this point in time. And if you listen to him, I mean, he acknowledged everything you'd want to hear from a guy who was struggling. A guy who didn't have the year that he wanted. But I do think that it is incumbent on Paul Maurice to definitively establish where he sees Pierre-Luc Dubois fitting in with this Jets team moving forward. To me, it's clear he's not a winger. He's a centerman. That's why you acquired him. That's why you paid extra to acquire him by virtue of the Jack Roslovic inclusion in the trade, because you have to pay more.
Round pick they get back.
right. You have to include more, to acquire a centerman than you do to have to, than trading a winger. So to me, there's no question that next year you go up the middle, starting with, to your point, Scheifele, Dubois, Lowry, question mark. Now, does that preclude you from re-sign Gustafsson? Likely. Does that preclude you from re-signing Paul Stastny? No, of course it doesn't. There's always, for the right price and the right dollar amount, there's room for any of those guys on the Winnipeg Jets team. But I do think that an established offseason where you have a exact firm date when you're going to be restarting, because we know that the season will start up again, a similar schedule to normal NHL times, will be beneficial. And there's a lot of pressure on Pierre-Luc Dubois to prove that this was an aberration and not a player who's, for whatever reason, not able to re-achieve what he succeeded with and re-achieve the accomplishments that he had when he was a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets.
Yeah, and like I said to you guys before, I have full confidence that I think he's going to accomplish that, because I think we've seen that element. I think it's just like sometimes we don't factor in the stress of this sort of move, right? And the change. I mean, even I remember that one play they highlighted was it Game 4 when he was playing with Nate Thompson and he didn't know where to go. He went to the wrong spot in the ice and he was playing it like he was a center, but he wasn't the winger. So there's that uncertainty. And I think once you give him, it just seemed like there was a lack of confidence. That would be the word that I would use probably with Pierre-Luc Dubois this season. He just seemed tentative and had a lack of confidence. And to Ezzy's point, here's a guy who has a lot of accomplishment in a less talented system in Columbus. I mean, Columbus doesn't have the forwards that the Jets do, and yet he managed to have success there. So it's not a function of, sure, he did it with Panarin, but to Ezzy's point, he did it when Panarin wasn't there. So you're still able to generate, you're still able to create on a less talented team. Now, with more talent, are you going to be able to do that? I truly feel, and again, I said this at the end of the season, I said, my feeling is you'll judge this trade much more fairly based on what we're talking about next summer with Pierre-Luc Dubois than this summer, based on all the circumstances that happened. Because I think you have to give him that full summer of training, a full training camp with the Winnipeg Jets, an opportunity to really anchor that second line center position, and then you see what you've got from there.
I would agree with everything you just said there, Mr. Minuk. Let's take our final commercial break of the show. When we come back, we'll talk about the Final Four in the NHL, some more Jets talk, of course, much more to come. You're listening, you're watching, you're chatting. We're live. It is the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.
Keeping Winnipeg laughing for over 30 years. Rumors, Canada's longest-running comedy club, bringing you the biggest laughs from the best comedians on the planet. Jerry Seinfeld, Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Dennis Miller, Brad Garrett, the greats, and all the up-and-comers too. When was the last time you laughed out loud? Make it a great night out with friends, or book your office or birthday party. Even a fundraising event at Rumors. Get all the details and dates on upcoming shows at rumorscomedyclub.com.
Hey, Drew.
Ezzy, whoa, what a smile!
Yeah, I got my crowns done at Linden Market Dental Center, and they whitened my teeth.
I see.
They're so bright that every time I smile, they go,
"We have hockey tonight. Do you have a mouth guard to protect those pearly whites?"
I sure do.
Whoa, they even ting through the mouth guard.
Linden Market Dental Center covers all your dental needs, from restorative to cosmetic dentistry, and will fit you with a sports guard for that active lifestyle. 877 Waverly. See lindenmarketdental.com.
Hi, it's Drew from Illegal Curve here. Selling your home can be stressful, but it wasn't for me. Thanks to my friends at Zappia Group Realty, they made the process so easy. My home sold within 48 hours, and with multiple offers. Zappia Group Realty took care of everything with their exquisite customer service and attention to detail. If you want to sell your home for more in less time, get started by talking to Frank and Mauro Zappia of Zappia Group Realty. Online at zappiagroup.com.
While you can't always count on your team winning, nor your favorite player scoring, one thing you can always count on is Bernstein's Deli. They've expanded their services because the team at Bernstein's Deli wants to accommodate your needs and keep you safe. Open Tuesday to Saturday from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. to serve you. Head to your phone, in-store or online to shop for groceries or order meals from the restaurant, like the legendary Illegal Curve Sandwich. Just go to bernsteinsdeli.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Saturday morning, we're back with the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, talking about the God, he's got the poster up behind him. Oh, Ezzy. God bless you. Better there than in your own house, though. That much is for sure. Because then you'd be Dave M's permanent roommate, even if Dave M isn't there. What did you bring tape with you, or do you have a ready supply of tape? That's what I want to know. Is it chewing gum?
It's got a little like kind of like rope type of thing.
Oh, it's got a little
kind of handle. Yeah, little thing on it.
There you go. Well,
so my artwork is being taken over for this beauty piece.
Well, I look forward to driving behind Ezzy, driving and seeing Ezzy driving around, also wearing it with the fancy Illegal Curve custom license
vanity plate. Yeah,
and then having that hanging off of his rearview mirror.
and then the police pulling me over and then taking me in.
Yeah, well, I mean, the police, it's straight, not even a hearing before the judge, just straight in and locking up the key and throwing it away for a while. But I think as a society, we'll all be better off when that happens for a little bit. Final four, we're down to the final four teams in the NHL.
I agree with Matthew about the Tim Hortons commercials, by the way.
Yeah, they're terrible.
They're awful.
I like Timmy's just as much as anybody. Like I enjoy a good Tim bit every now and then, but the commercials have been a little weak this season.
It is. I went off in this last maybe on the post game show.
It was game 4 post game show.
I think I said thank God. The one good thing is we don't have to watch. I mean, those commercials are so painful.
Yeah,
they really are. Like, I mean, sometimes you watch a TV commercial. The only problem is it's almost so bad that we're talking about it, and maybe that's achieved their goal. But they're like, oh, what about Shea Weber? What about this guy?
Somebody wrote about it also. I'm trying to remember. I read it in print somewhere also earlier this week. About,
it's painful. I don't know that it merited a print column necessarily, but it was pretty bad.
I think it was somebody from Ottawa maybe wrote it. I can't remember exactly who wrote it, but it was certainly a fair comment nonetheless. But after this show's over, I'm off to watch all the PVR episodes of Kess's House that I have readily available. So I
still want to know, first off, why is Post Malone on the show, and why in the promo does he have a sword?
Well, I mean, if somebody
why did someone think that?
Maybe it's like a Kill Bill sort of thing where they're, where Post Malone is going to be, using that sword, like I don't know who the actress was.
The Sword of Damocles.
Well, that's I think a different sword altogether. But yeah, I mean, look, if they can assure me that somebody's getting severed with a sword, I might watch it. I might tune in at least, or watch the clip on YouTube at that point in time. But other than that, I'm not sure I'm going to be tuning in for anything to do with Post Malone or Ryan.
It's going to be a nice weekend. And I probably, sorry Ryan, I'm not going to be watching Kess's House. I'm more of a Dave's House type of guy. So well, somebody will be watching it, I guess.
I'm not sure about that. Let's talk about the Final Four. We have Tampa Bay and the New York Islanders. That starts tomorrow afternoon. And then Vegas and Montreal starts on Monday evening. I just saw something come over the wire, that being Twitter, given that it's 2021, saying Jeff Petrie and Jake Evans will travel with the Montreal Canadiens to Vegas. So certainly the Montreal Canadiens are in tough regardless, but they will definitely need Jeff Petrie to be back in their lineup, and certainly just good to see Jake Evans, at least on the road to recovery. I find it very odd that they're not starting tonight. I mean, I don't quite know why the series ended. Yeah. I mean, Tampa Bay and the Islanders ended, Tuesday, Wednesday? They've been off for a while, but in any event, they start tomorrow and then Monday.
I believe each team has one Saturday game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Each series is going to have, depending, I think it depends how long the series goes. But I agree. I think tonight, wouldn't you want to start the Montreal-Vegas series tonight?
Well, I think you'd want to start. I mean, you'd want to start one of the series.
Guys, it's the same NHL that's had back-to-back in the first 2 rounds. So
that's just it. They're in such a rush to cram in the North Division playoffs that they make them play back to back, and then they give them like this weird extended break for the conference finals. But the NHL is going to do what the NHL is going to do, and no matter how much we scratch our brows and furrow our brows, they're not going to change our minds about it. And I'll be honest, with the weather report the way it's going to be and the temperature the way it's going to be, I'm much more of a highlights kind of guy at this time of the year, as opposed to sit in front of the boob tube and watch that for hours on end.
Drew's going to be doing some schwitzing this weekend. Let me tell you that much.
I'm going to be enjoying.
The boob tube's right behind Desi.
The boob tube is right behind Desi. I was going to say the same thing. It was a bit of a setup there for you there, Mr. Minute.
Hi, Samantha.
In any event, gentlemen, give me some.
I looked over the wrong shoulder there, Dave. I got excited.
Give me some analysis on these final 4 between the Golden Knights and the Habs and the Lightning and the Islanders.
Well, let's start with, Habs and Golden Knights we've been talking about a lot. I mean, this looks, I think, more of a mismatch maybe than, Toronto and Montreal certainly did. I mean, look at the way the Golden Knights handled the Avalanche, guys. I mean, I think, a lot of us were expecting that series to go to 7 games.
Yeah.
So I think, Montreal is going up against arguably the deepest team in the NHL aside from the Lightning. So when you're talking about whether, it's the top line that you're talking about with Chandler Stevenson, Mark Stone, and Pacioretty, or if it's the second line with Carlson, Marchessault, and Smith, like I was talking to Dave about this off air, go back to 2018, that was your top line, Marchessault, Smith, and Carlson. And now that's your second line. The Golden Knights essentially have 2 first lines. That's what I think makes them so dangerous. They're unbelievable. Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo, like the game-winning goal that Pietrangelo scored in Game 6. First off, I don't know what he was doing up there, but obviously he's a guy that knows when to pick his spots. So it's just such a deep team, top to bottom. Like you go down, with their defensemen like Alex Martinez, Braden McNabb, Manitoban, Zach Whitecloud of the Sioux Valley Dakota Nation, just outside of Brandon. Like I just and even the fourth line, and that's maybe the only area that Montreal has the edge is the fourth line with Eric Stahl, Corey Perry, and Joel Armia. The fourth line of the Golden Knights is maybe not as good as it was in previous years. Dave mentioned it earlier. You've got Ryan Reeves, Keegan Colasar, 2 Manitobans, and then you've got William Carrier. So I think top to bottom, the Golden Knights are a deeper team, and I think the series will be won at 5-on-5. Like I don't think either team's power play is going to make or break this series. So I probably like the Golden Knights. I do think this is going to be a longer series, maybe than some people think. Like I'd probably go Golden Knights in 6, but I'll be cheering for the Habs. I'd love to see the Habs get to the Stanley Cup final. I just think this Golden Knights team, Dave, is going to present a much bigger challenge than either the Leafs or the Jets have presented.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's one of those situations where I think this first game is going to be so important for Montreal. I think if Montreal can somehow pick up a win in Game 1, it is going to give them so much confidence because so many people have already written them off. So many people, and I think back to our conversation with Jeff O'Neill a month or 2 back when we talked about what will it be like when a North team finally goes up against, one of these teams. And he said, there is a high level of uncertainty. It could be a sweep or it could be sweep either way. You don't know what's going to happen. And everybody has discounted Montreal. Everybody. I don't think anybody is picking them to beat Vegas. But I wonder how impactful that first game will be. Now, I think Vegas has been there, done that. This isn't a team that is fragile. So I don't think a Game 1 win is going to shatter their confidence, shatter their ability to ultimately win the series. But I think it will give Montreal so much confidence moving forward, given how, Carey Price has played. Now, you're playing again against a team that's deeper than the Jets, deeper than the Leafs. So it's a different animal. But guys, we've seen goaltenders win series before. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible for Carey Price, who we talked about, played not a lot in the end of the season. So he's fairly fresh, relatively speaking, and he looked good. Now, he didn't have to be incredible because the Jets didn't exactly burn him. The Habs were able to kind of impose their will on the Winnipeg Jets. So Carey Price wasn't, feverishly tested, but maybe that's, to that end, that's kept him fresh for this series. So we'll see. I think it's going to be a fascinating goaltending battle. I think it's going to be a fascinating series. I know a lot of people think that Montreal isn't going to necessarily win a game, but I don't know. I just think like that first game is going to be absolutely critical for setting the stage for the rest of the series.
And I wanted to mention too, Drew, just quickly before, I know you want to get to the Islanders and the Lightning, but I think, you have that whole big trade between these two teams and the fact that they're meeting, right? And unless it was, under this, COVID type of scenario, you would have never seen this in the conference final, right? Because obviously they're in different conferences normally, right? So, and the Pacioretty trade is the one I'm talking about, obviously, right?
Pacioretty for Suzuki. Both players
Nick
making
Suzuki he's an emerging star. Like Suzuki, I think he was almost underrated in that series. Like I realized Phil Deneau was talked about a lot. Other players Corey Perry and Kotkaniemi and guys like this, but Suzuki Toffoli is another guy, obviously, who scored 2 big goals. Like Suzuki, Toffoli, Caulfield, guys, that line is really good. And even if you give the edge to Marchessault, Smith, Carlson, it's not that big of an edge. So I agree with Dave. I would almost be shocked if the Golden Knights swept the Canadiens. I'm expecting this to be a 6 or 7 game series. Maybe it's 5. But I would be absolutely shocked if the Golden Knights swept the Canadiens. Even and I'll say this much: I do think the Golden Knights are probably on paper the second best team that's left out of the 4 teams. But this Canadiens team has been disrespected almost all playoffs long, and all they've done is prove people wrong. So it should be a pretty good long series.
Before we quickly talk about the Tampa and the Islanders series, we remind you that this segment is brought to you by Boston Pizza. Boston Pizza has the perfect starting lineup tonight with the BP Game Day Meal Deal. Choose 2 of your favorite medium gourmet pizzas like the Spicy Pierogi or the Mighty Meteor, along with a triple order of Boston's famous wings plus 2 dipping sauces, all for $54.99. That kind of feast serves 5 to 6 people. Available for takeout and delivery only at bostonpizza.com or download the MyBP app.
You're a meat eater, Drew.
Yes, I know. For a second consecutive year, the Lightning and the Islanders meet.
You weren't going to indulge me there.
I'm not. I'm just way on right past you.
You've been indulging me for far too long, decades.
Far too long. I mean, far too long in life, far too long this morning, basically far too long in any way, shape, or form. Moving on, Tampa Bay and the New York Islanders, they meet again. Last year, the Lightning dispatched the Islanders with relative ease. This year, will it be the same between the Tampa Bay juggernaut and the well-coached, well-managed, well-oiled machine that is the New York Islanders?
Yeah, I think so. Again, look at who the Islanders have defeated, right? They've defeated good teams. And, Tampa Bay, I think, we would all agree, we're probably a little bit surprised that they defeated the Hurricanes in 5. Mm-hmm. But that just, speaks to the talent that they have. We mentioned it earlier with Marty Biron, they've got, $100 million talent, right? When you consider, I'm not going to get Drew going. We all know Drew's, anybody who's watched the show, everybody knows that. I'm
biting my tongue already. Don't worry.
We can't handle the truth right now.
Well, and I mean, I agree with you, Drew. It was a little bit ridiculous that Nikita Kucherov just happened to come back for the start of the playoffs. But I mean,
magic. It was a miracle.
But they said that at the beginning of the year, right? They kind of laid it out. So there was no secret what Tampa Bay was doing. They literally said Kucherov is going to miss the regular season and he's going to be back for the playoffs. And the NHL said, okay, they basically let them get away with it. But I mean, clearly the Lightning are the team to beat in this series. But look at when you're talking about in goal, I don't know how big of an advantage Tampa Bay has. Vasilevsky's a Vezina finalist. He might win the Vezina. But
perennial Vezina finalist.
No, exactly. And he's still pretty young, right? What is he, 24, 25 years old? And, I think with Varlamov and Sorokin, you've got 2 really good goaltenders for the Islanders. So I think you'd give the edge to Tampa Bay, Dave, but it's a very small edge because those guys were really good, throughout the first couple rounds. So I think, this series is not a coin flip, but I think it's going to be closer than some people think. I would probably take Tampa if you're asking for my prediction, but I could easily see this series going 7. I could easily see the Islanders winning the series. Look at the Islanders don't have the star power that the Lightning have. They don't have Nikita Kucherov. They don't have Steven Stamkos. They don't even have Braden Point. But who they do have? They've got Matt Barzal, who's a really good player. They've got Josh Bailey, who's a really good player. Kyle Palmieri was a great acquisition, right? Yeah. And their defense is excellent. Their top 6 is, that's why they're there right now, guys, right? You've got Manitoba's Ryan Pollock, great defenseman, Adam Pelech. great defensemen. Nick Leddy.
I
really like Brock Nelson, former UND standout. Like, you go up and down their lineup, and we talked about their fourth line with Cizikas, Clutterbuck, and Martin. Like, this team is built for the playoffs. They've been really successful in the playoffs the last few years. That's all they do is make the playoffs with Barry Trotz. So, yeah, like, are the Lightning going to win some games and most likely win this series and score a lot of goals? Yeah, but it's not going to be as easy as it was in the Hurricane series. I think the Islanders are going to be a really tough out. And like I said, I do think the Lightning ultimately prevail and go to the Stanley Cup final, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Islanders take the series. I really wouldn't.
I just like the fact that Barry Trotz, whenever he goes, I'll have a Russian netminder in goal. whenever he's asked by the media, Barry Trotz just doesn't get spoken about enough. I'm sorry. This guy, first of all, and I don't know him in any way, shape, or form. I won't pretend to, but he just seems like an all world-class guy off the ice. And all of the humanitarian work you hear him do, all the people who know him and speak to him, how highly they speak to him as a person, and look, at the end of the day, the NHL is a business, but this guy just seems like such a good guy, like, and such a smart, like he's the full. First of all, he's a Manitoban, so we're always happy to promote that. But the truth is, he really has it all. He's a world-class human, but he's also a world-class coach. And he gets so much out of his teams each and every year. It doesn't matter where he is. I think I saw a stat that said, Washington hasn't won a series since they, amicably parted ways. Yeah. And of course, he hasn't won the ultimate prize, but he's won quite a few series, obviously, with the New York Islanders. So such a good coach. You really can't undervalue. John Cooper also, though, an excellent hockey coach. So you got to give him credit. And they both have, like as he said, I mean, and like Marty Baron came on and said, what line do you think is starting that for game one? For sure, that Cizikas line. There's no question. I mean, that is the Barry Trotz. But talk about, to Ezzy's point, how many times in the last decade can you say a fourth line has stayed together the way they've stayed together in New York? And by the way, as a quick aside, the co-owner of the New York Islanders, what is his name, Ledecky?
Yeah, he's the main owner, I believe.
He's the primary owner. You got to give him, like, that was, I don't know if you guys saw, but after the Islanders won round 2, he was in the subway with the fans, and they were chanting like Ledecky, and it was so funny, and it was just John Ledecky.
They've got great fans. We were there for Drew's bachelor party.
First of all,
back in 2012, we checked out a game at the Coliseum, Nassau, and I mean, it's almost like you're walking into a museum, or you're walking into the old Winnipeg Arena. And I realize they've done some renovations, but those fans, I mean, there's a lot of good fans around the NHL, Dave. But those Islanders fans, they're loud.
When the Coliseum gets rocking, then it rocks, like, because it's such an old school building. They don't build them that way anymore. So it doesn't have the, it's got the low ceiling, it's got the low roof, it's got the intimate feel.
I love that, Drew. Like, I realized we went to MSG too. Like, we checked out. We were lucky that we got to see the Jets play in New Jersey and Long Island and MSG. The Coliseum was almost my favorite of the three. And I'm a Devils fan.
It was the most old school. It had the most history MSG has a lot of history, but MSG was undergoing renovations while we were there, so it sort of felt like it was in the transition period. But the Coliseum was, it was a dump, and it was the right kind of a dump.
But it's got that history behind it. Like, those Stanley Cups were won there. Like, it's just, there's something about it that, anyways, I know we're going on.
This is the last run. They got the new arena opening next fall. So this is the last run in the Coliseum.
Is there a name for it? It's in Belmont.
Yeah,
is it called Belmont or something?
The UBS Arena, I think it's a banking company
and Belmont is the area, company. Right? It's the
Belmont. Yeah, it's right next to the Belmont track. Right. It's in that same sort of development.
Yeah. So this is a big opportunity. Like, and a few other guys I wanted to throw in there. I didn't mention them. Like Jordan Eberle, like Marty Biron talked about this. And by the way, Marty's just awesome. Every time we have him on, we're so lucky that we get to have him on and talk hockey with him. Jordan Eberle is a guy that, like, I don't think, gets talked about enough. Like, he's on the top line of the Islanders, and he's having a great playoffs. I'd have to check how many points he has. I think he has like 8 or 9 points for the Islanders. And Leo Komarov, Marty mentioned, like, you think of Komarov and you're like, this is a third line guy, fourth line guy. No, like, he puts him out there, with Barzal and Eberle and another guy, JG Pajot. Like, these are just these are not, again, they're not star players. You don't think of them in the same way as, Stamkos or Braden Point or even like a guy like Anthony Cirelli or Andre Palat. But these are just really good. Like, it's almost like the Islanders have an entire team of like second line guys.
Well,
right?
And what's important about their success is you look at the guys, you mentioned Eberle, how they acquire him. They acquired him via trade for Griffin Reinhart, if I'm not mistaken. Was that the trade? So. I mean, boy, that was a terrible trade for Edmonton.
Well, they wanted to get rid of him. Yeah, that was a terrible trade.
But that was a terrible trade for Edmonton.
It's not like the Oilers have made bad 1-for-1 trades before.
Never before. JG Pajot, they get from Ottawa via trade. Kyle Palmieri, they get from the Devils via trade. I mean, Lou Lamoriello has reinvented himself as a hell of an NHL general manager. If you thought that maybe he was on his way out after he left New Jersey and after New Jersey struggled, then he went to Toronto and he sort of helped. I mean, he gets, in my books, he gets
a lot
Ryan
of credit. Strome, Drew. It was Ryan
Strome. It was. I mean, it was Griffin Reinhart for like a second round.
Still a bad trade.
Yeah,
Strome's had some good years with the Rangers, but I mean, Eberle's better. Let's be honest.
But the point is that the Islanders, the Oilers shouldn't trade with the Islanders anymore because the Islanders have won a couple of the different trades that they've engaged in together. But look, the Islanders they're a good team. They're a well-run franchise. They finally have solid ownership. They have a new arena coming. Everything about the New York Islanders is pointing upwards, that they should be a destination for free agents. And you wonder, John Tavares, given, how he would look in the New York Islanders jersey still right now, as opposed to the Toronto Maple Leafs pajamas that I believe he wears on a nightly basis.
I think that this third round is, and this is just the hockey nerd and hockey fan in me, like, I do think that I expect the third round to be better. Let's be honest, guys, like the second round wasn't very good.
Well, Colorado Vegas was. That was the only. That was the best.
That was good, but the series ended kind of like, as you like to say, with a whimper, not a bang, right? Because you had Colorado who had won 6 games in a row, and then when Game 5 was obviously the big one that Colorado needed, but Vegas just destroyed Colorado. It wasn't an epic, Game 6. Like it was over after the first period. So I mean, and whatever series you want to look at, like the Islanders Bruins series, like. That wasn't a great series. It was pretty competitive, but towards the end of that series, the Islanders started to take over. The Jets have series was obviously not a great series.
You mean the New York Saints?
The New York. Look,
exactly.
I know you gotta again. See, I don't want to get too up, but like even the fans playing like for the New Orleans Saints, how they have the marching band and
when
stuff like
that. When the
Saints
come marching in,
the Saints come marching in, and then I don't know if you guys saw the video, but there were like a bunch of Islanders fans with the brass bonanza playing like when the Saints come marching in. So I mean that was some fun. That was a funny element of the of that series.
Look, hockey should be fun. The Islanders fans have been making it fun, but you're right. In the second round,
hockey is fun.
The cream certainly rose to the top. The cream rose to the crop when it came to the Canadians defeating the Jets, when it came to the Golden Knights defeating the Avs, when it came to the Islanders dispatching the Bruins. Both the top of the crop. How about you just shut the hell up? How about that for a response from me instead? And of course the way the Lightning dispatched the Carolina Hurricanes. That's it for us on this Saturday morning. We of course will have tons of coverage all week long. It feels weird to only be broadcasting once a week because, of course, there's no post-game shows with the season being over. But Dave Minuk with illegalcurve.com, there's going to be a ton of content all week long, all summer long.
Doing it as we speak.
There you go.
Putting it on the Instagram right now. Instagram.
Dave's always working. There's always things happening. I really do think that Dave runs the internet.
There you go. Follow us on Instagram as well in case you aren't already doing so. We've got some great photographs that our terrific photographers take game in and game out when there are games, of course. Illegalcurve.com, your home for all your latest Winnipeg Jets news. If there's any audio, if there's any video, it'll be on the website. It'll also be here on our YouTube channel. Before you depart, if you haven't already subscribed, be sure to do that. Subscribe, hit the subscribe button. You get alerted each and every time we go live here on YouTube. Of course, also smash the like button. We appreciate the thumbs up that you can give us each and every time you tune in here for the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Want to give a shout out to all of our sponsors: Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Linden Market Dental Center, Bernstein's Deli, Zappia Group Realty, Boston Pizza, and of course our friends at Seagram's. Support these fine businesses, support these fine companies, because they support Illegal Curve Hockey. They make this show become a reality each and every time we go live. Big shout out to, of course, Ty and LaBrokery for sending Ezzy the poster, which he has hung up over the window.
Shout out to Samantha Fox. She's never looked better.
Thank you, Ezzy, for that. Dave Manouk is in the top right corner. Ezzy Ginsburg is in the bottom center. I am your host, Drew Mindell. Until next Saturday at 9 a.m., we thank you for watching, and we remind you that if it's Saturday, it's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on YouTube and all of our social media platforms.